The engine of Ethan Caldwell's Ford Ranger was still warm when he vanished from the small forest-edge town of Havelock, North Carolina, population 12,087. The late June night rolled in with a thick white fog settling over the entrance to Croatan National Forest, like a thin curtain muffling every sound. At 10:17 p.m., Ethan's neighbor, Mr. John Robert Lane, waved through the kitchen window as the 24-year-old stepped out of his truck, carrying a faded green labeled bottle of water to return after a brief evening visit. The bottle, something Mr. Lane had kept in his garage for over 2 decades, swung lightly in Ethan's hand as he crossed the narrow path between the 2 forest-edge houses. The older man stood there, watching Ethan's figure melt into the dense fog. The young man's thin gray shirt, the last streak of color before the woods swallowed the light. What happened in the next 47 minutes would haunt Havelock for the next 15 years. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. In October 2001, the coastal town of Havelock in North Carolina still maintained its distinctive military-civilian rhythm, with roads leading straight to the edge of Croatan National Forest, where dense pine stands stretched for miles. Ethan Caldwell, 23 years old, lived with his family near US 70, worked part-time at an outdoor equipment store, and usually finished his shifts in the late afternoon. That day he came home, changed clothes, checked his old green pickup truck, and told his mother he had something to take care of that evening. The person Ethan planned to meet was Jessica Marlowe, his ex-girlfriend of the same age, who now worked at a diner near MCK's Cherry Point. After breaking up a few months earlier, they had kept minimal contact, mostly to tie up loose ends, and that night, Jessica had initiated the meeting to discuss some unresolved personal matters. Around after 9 p.m., Ethan drove to the agreed meeting spot near the edge of town, picked up Jessica, then turned onto one of the dirt roads leading deep into the northern part of Croatan National Forest area. Both were familiar with from camping trips during their relationship. This was the last time anyone in the family saw Ethan. By nearly midnight, when Ethan hadn't returned as usual, his mother called his phone but got no answer. The family assumed he might have stopped by a friend's place or extended the meeting, but by dawn they began contacting close acquaintances to verify his whereabouts the previous evening. No one had seen Ethan after he left home. Friends hadn't received any calls or messages. The family tried calling Jessica but couldn't reach her, and as daylight broke, they drove around the routes Ethan usually took but found no sign of him. Ethan staying out overnight without contact was completely out of character. He always gave notice if he would be late and had never left the family without communication for more than a few hours. After exhausting every possible lead themselves from calling friends, rechecking Ethan's usual routes, to attempting to contact Jessica Marlowe without response, the family realized the situation was beyond their ability to handle and immediately reported him missing to the Carteret County Sheriff's Office. The Carteret County Sheriff's Office received the call early the next morning and recorded the family's account that Ethan had left home the previous evening to meet Jessica and had not returned. At the desk, the investigator noted the timeline the family recalled. Ethan left home sometime after 9 p.m. No further contact. His mother called multiple times with no answer. No friends had seen him that night, and the last known person with Ethan was Jessica. The family also reported that Ethan usually drove a green Ford Ranger pickup with local plates, and his likely direction was toward Croatan National Forest. After confirming Ethan had no history of running away, no significant deaths, or serious conflicts, police classified this as a missing adult case with unusual circumstances. A patrol unit was immediately dispatched to sweep the dirt roads leading into the forest as described by the family and areas Ethan had frequented in the past. Just over an hour later, a deputy radioed back to dispatch that they had located a green Ford Ranger parked crookedly on the shoulder of a narrow dirt branch road in Croatan Forest, about 15 minutes' drive from Havelock. The license plate matched the family's information. The patrol unit requested backup and established a Level 1 scene perimeter basic access restriction in cases of a missing person who might be injured or had abandoned their vehicle. They noted the truck's position on uneven ground, one wheel slightly sunk into soft soil from the night's dew. The driver's door was closed but unlocked, passenger door locked, no broken glass, headlights off, no signs of forced external interference. The surrounding terrain was thick pine forest with limited visibility and a small trail leading deeper in. With early morning humidity high on the ground, it was difficult to distinguish old from fresh footprints. The patrol unit conducted only a general observation, including the truck's position relative to the trail, tire direction, door status, and nearby open space, but performed no in-depth forensic work such as collecting trace evidence. The goal at this stage was solely to confirm Ethan's vehicle, secure the area to prevent disturbance, and prepare to hand off the scene to the main investigative team. The unusual abandonment of the truck deep in the woods raised the urgency level, and on-site personnel immediately recommended expanding the search once support arrived. Right after Ethan's Ford Ranger was located and the area received preliminary containment, a search team was mobilized to the scene to begin the initial approach phase. With the primary task of determining the most likely direction Ethan would have moved if he left the vehicle under his own power. K9 tracking was requested from the county support unit, including 2 scent dogs trained for missing person searches in dense forest terrain. Upon approaching the truck, the handlers allowed the dogs to sniff surfaces likely to hold Ethan's scent, including the door handle, driver's seat, and small items left in the cab that the patrol team had not moved. After a few minutes of scent familiarization, both dogs headed directly north into the forest area, toward a small trail leading deeper into Croatan. However, only a few dozen meters in, the scent weakened dramatically, and both dogs showed signs of losing the trail, forcing the handlers to return to the vehicle and retry from the start with the same result. The scent originated from the truck, but did not extend far into the woods. The K9 failure to track beyond a short distance suggested 2 possibilities. Ethan did not leave the vehicle in the direction the search team anticipated, or the scent had dissipated due to time and overnight dew. In parallel with the K9 efforts, the ground search team established a sweep line within a 200-meter, 300-meter radius around the truck, using a straight-line formation with fixed spacing between members to ensure no small ground clues were missed. The terrain was relatively flat but covered by a thick layer of pine needles, with many uneven sections making it hard to differentiate old from fresh footprints. Team members noted several small trails left by locals or hunters, but none showed signs of recent activity around the time of Ethan's disappearance. Some low-level disturbances on the ground, such as shifted or lightly compressed pine needles, were recorded, but none distinct enough to confirm adult human movement. The team paid special attention to the edge of a shallow stream about 150 meters from the truck, since areas near water tend to preserve footprints longer. But no compatible track patterns were found within the estimated time frame. All suspicious spots were flagged and photographed, but none rose to the level of requiring expanded analysis. During the sweep line, the team also inspected natural obstacles like fallen trees, small mud puddles, depressions, and leaf litter, or secondary paths branching deeper into the woods. None provided any direct indication that Ethan had left the vehicle on foot. One searcher noted a broken root section pointing northwest, but the break appeared old and unrelated to Ethan's time frame. The area immediately around the truck was rechecked to ensure no overlooked evidence, such as personal items, drag marks, or unusual mud patterns on the vehicle body. However, daylight revealed no significant ground disturbance within close range, a factor noted in the report as increasing the strangeness of the scene. After completing the 300-meter sweep line, the search team leader compiled the preliminary report, confirming that across the entire scanned area, there were no clear signs proving Ethan had left the vehicle on foot. K9 lost the trail almost immediately. Terrain failed to preserve usable tracks, and no physical evidence lay close enough to guide the investigation. This report was immediately forwarded to the lead investigator for the next evaluation phase, concluding the initial on-site search stage. Right after completing the preliminary search report and confirming no clear indication of Ethan's direction of travel within the close radius, the investigative team and search forces shifted to the extended search zone phase, following the 2001 NC-ASAR standards, a standardized system used by North Carolina rescue forces to assess the behavior and likely travel distance of missing persons based on terrain, time, personal characteristics, and circumstances of leaving the last known location. The lead investigator gathered all available data on Ethan for input into the model, including age, average physical condition, no mobility limiting medical issues, clothing, unspecified but likely suitable for a fall night, and especially the unconfirmed nature of his departure from the vehicle, voluntary or forced. The lost person behavior model required classification into behavioral groups: voluntary departure, injured in the woods, disoriented lost, or sudden vehicle abandonment. With no evidence of violence at the vehicle site, Ethan's case was placed in the category of an adult walking in the forest at night with uncertain orientation. Applying the model's statistical data tables, the analysis team determined the initial search radius from Ethan's last known point ranged from 0.8 to 2.1 miles, depending on terrain and natural barriers. In Croatan National Forest, with its dense tree cover, mix of rises, shallow streams, and small swampy patches distances, a person could cover in darkness were significantly reduced. Therefore, the SAR team leader set the official primary search radius at 1.5 miles as the central standard, with specialized teams allowed to extend to 2 miles in easier travel zones. Once the radius was agreed upon, the next step was dividing the search area into 4 main quadrants, each aligned with a cardinal direction from the truck's position: northeast, southeast, southwest, and northwest. Each quadrant was outlined on 1,024,000 scale topographic maps provided by the Forestry Service. The terrain analysis team examined each quadrant to identify priority search points. They noted that the northeast had many natural animal trails, but also gentle slopes easy to traverse. The southeast contained thick underbrush and soft ground near small swamps. The southwest featured numerous old hunter trails, while the northwest stood out with a series of steep drops that impeded movement and could easily disorient someone in the dark. Beyond terrain, the team evaluated environmental factors per the lost person behavior model, such as wind speed, soil moisture, nighttime temperature, and whether Ethan likely carried a light source. The combined results indicated higher probability of movement north and northeast, as those offered the easiest nighttime travel with the fewest injury hazards. However, since the reason for leaving the vehicle remained undetermined, voluntary or coerced, search efforts were not restricted to one direction, but spread evenly across all 4 quadrants. After completing the zoned map, the SAR team established the search grid formal square-based search formation adjusted for tree density and travel conditions. Each grid measured 50 to 100 meters per side, depending on visibility difficulty. Teams were assigned per grid with instructions to note any foreign objects, tracks, or surface disturbances. High-risk areas, such as swamps, shallow streams, fallen trees, or steep terrain, were pre-marked for specialized difficult-access teams to avoid endangering searchers. Some old forestry vehicle trails were also prioritized, as the lost person behavior model notes that missing persons often unconsciously follow recognizable or naturally open paths. Completing the full search grid took over 2 hours, with the mapping team continuously adjusting boundaries due to varying forest density. Once assignments were set, the team leader ordered grid-based search deployment, starting from the truck as the center point, expanding outward in overlapping concentric rings across the 4 quadrants. All personnel were required to maintain radio contact on the internal channel and report any sign immediately, no matter how small: depressions, fabric scraps, footprints, personal items, were signs of someone sitting or lying on the ground. To ensure consistency, SAR coordination set a 90-minute time frame for the first grid sweep cycle, after which the entire team would regroup to compile results and refine the area if needed. These setup steps marked the transition from preliminary to structured behavior-based search, giving deploying forces a scientific basis to evaluate Ethan's likely nighttime movement and identify high-priority zones for upcoming phases. Right after the lost person behavior model search structure was implemented and the quadrants clearly delineated, SAR forces entered the first large area search phase, in which every zone within the 1.5-mile radius from the Ford Ranger's position had to be systematically swept according to terrain priority order. The coordination team signaled the start, and the 4 search prongs immediately dispersed in their assigned directions, ensuring full coverage of the area. The behavior model predicted an adult could have reached from the time Ethan left home until the truck was found. In the northeast quadrant, where terrain was relatively flat with many natural trails, the foot team deployed a wide line formation, maintaining even spacing to observe the ground beneath the pine canopy. Each member continuously checked for minor signs such as displaced needles, slight soil depressions, or irregular footprint shapes. Some trail sections showed recent pedestrian activity, but nothing clearly indicated Ethan's passage. The foot team leader ordered those points documented, but did not linger to avoid delaying progress. In the southeast quadrant, the water edge team moved along the banks of shallow streams and small ponds scattered through the forest. Water edge areas often preserve footprints or dropped items longer, as missing persons tend toward moonlight reflection or the sound of flowing water. The water edge team swept every meter of stream bank, inspecting decaying leaves, shoreline rocks, soft clay patches, and depressions near the water. A few small indentations were found, but they were too vague to confirm as shoe prints and could have been from wildlife. All were photographed and mapped. The southwest quadrant had many old hunter trails, So the foot team there focused especially on distinguishing new from old tracks. They examined differences in depth, compression, and freshness of soil adhering to leaf surfaces. A few fairly clear footprints appeared, but their shape and size did not match an adult man's shoe or were too old. No location suggested Ethan's presence. The northwest quadrant was the most difficult, with numerous steep drops hindering movement. Searchers used probing poles to test soil softness before stepping to avoid sinkholes. Thick canopy drastically reduced light, making track observation harder. Members noted that this area had almost no natural trails, meaning a missing person was unlikely to head this way at night unless forced. Still, the entire zone was fully swept to meet no-miss requirements. While the four teams carried out their tasks, the Central Coordination Group continuously updated the master map to ensure no area was overlooked or duplicated. Team leaders radioed reports upon grid completion or when terrain obstacles required formation adjustments. This kept progress relatively even with no major interruptions. Around midday, the Water Edge team in the southeast quadrant reported to Central Command that they had located a small object amid decaying leaves and tree roots near a shallow stream bank, about 480 meters from the truck. The item was described as a dark-colored baseball cap lying just under a thin layer of leaves. Since the family had reported that Ethan often wore a cap while driving, the find was immediately flagged as potential evidence. The Water Edge team did not touch the object, but established a containment circle, photographed its position, and used plastic stakes to mark the boundary for preservation for the main investigative team. GPS coordinates were recorded and relayed to Central, where the lead investigator quickly cross-checked against family-provided information. The discovery shifted search emphasis toward the southeast area, but per SAR protocol, all quadrants had to continue full sweeps until completion of the first grid cycle. Other teams were instructed to maintain pace and formation, avoiding scope changes that could disrupt the systematic search. The Northeast Foot team continued checking intersecting trails and low spots where a missing person might pause or fall. The Southwest team swept denser brush as they neared the 1.5-mile boundary. The Northwest team, despite difficult terrain, documented every potential track-holding point. After nearly 3 hours of continuous searching, the coordination team announced completion of all grids for the first large area sweep. Teams returned to the rally point, where the map was updated with the new mark for the cap suspected to belong to Ethan. The evidence was logged in the report with discovery location, surrounding conditions, and planned handover to the investigative team per standard procedure. This was the first item directly linked to Ethan found beyond the truck, and it became a key basis for shifting search focus toward the nearby stream bank area. Even though Ethan's exact direction of travel could not yet be confirmed, the report for the first large area search was finalized and prepared for transfer to the lead investigator for the next coordination and analysis phase. Right after the search team completed the large area sweep and the report on the first piece of evidence was forwarded to the temporary command center, the investigative team focused on the next task in the protocol for handling missing persons cases with unusual elements, collecting first-round witness statements to establish a basic information framework for timeline analysis, route mapping, and evaluating possibilities related to Ethan's disappearance. The first person interviewed was Jessica Marlowe, as she was the last known person to have been with Ethan on the evening before he vanished. The investigative team scheduled Jessica to come to the sheriff's office that same morning, clearly informing her that this was an information verification session and not yet accusatory or directly suspicious in nature. When the session began, Jessica was asked to recount the entire sequence of events from the moment Ethan picked her up at the meeting spot until the two parted ways. She stated that Ethan met her sometime after 9 p.m. to talk about some unfinished matters, and the two drove into the Croatan Forest Road to avoid being seen by acquaintances. According to Jessica, as soon as the truck stopped to talk, a strange man appeared from the darkness, approaching with a threatening demeanor. She described the man as tall, black, wearing dark clothing, and standing a few meters away before Ethan stepped out of the truck. Jessica claimed she was terrified and could not clearly recall the subsequent events beyond the man pulling Ethan farther into the darkness while she fled toward the main road, found a safe place, and only then began trying to get help. She said that after running some distance, she became disoriented and did not dare return. The entire statement was recorded verbatim and documented as round one witness statement, not yet cross-referenced with other data. After taking Jessica's statement, the investigators moved to the second group of witnesses, residents living along the section of US 70 near the entrance to Croatan National Forest. A couple living beside the road reported hearing an unusually slow engine sound around just before 10 p.m. different from the typical stopping vehicles of local families, as the sound was prolonged and heavier, resembling a vehicle traveling over gravel or soft dirt. The husband added that the movement sounded intermittent, but since they did not see it directly, they could not identify the vehicle type or how many people were inside. Another resident living near the turnoff to the dirt road stated they saw headlights shining through their window sometime after 10:15 p.m., but paid little attention to details because vehicles entering and exiting the forest were not uncommon in the area. Although the residents' statements did not provide definitive identification or occupant numbers, they helped initially confirm that a vehicle matching Ethan's had moved into the forest within the time frame consistent with Jessica's account. The third group of witnesses consisted of 3 young people in Havelock who reported seeing Ethan and Jessica standing next to Ethan's truck in a parking lot near a convenience store about 30 to 40 minutes before Ethan left town. One member of the group said they had the impression the two were having a fairly tense conversation, though they could not hear the content. They left the area before Ethan, so they did not know where the two went next. The timing of this statement aligned with the family-provided data about when Ethan left home, allowing investigators to reconstruct the early part of the timeline more solidly. In addition to the 3 main witness groups, the investigative team reviewed any nearby security cameras in areas where Ethan was last seen in town, but given the year 2001, the number of cameras was limited and no valuable footage was obtained. All round 1 statements were collected in the same morning and entered into a comprehensive data table, categorized by group, statements from involved parties, indirect statements related to the vehicle, and statements about the last sighting in town. Investigators then created a cross-reference table of key time points: when Ethan left home, when he appeared at the parking lot, when the vehicle was heard or seen moving near the forest entrance, and when Jessica claimed the incident occurred. In this data table, each statement was assigned a preliminary reliability code based on factors such as direct versus indirect observation, witness recallability, and degree of correlation with other collected data. Information that could not yet be analyzed or verified was flagged for follow-up confirmation in the next step. The data compilation session concluded with the transfer of all round 1 statements to the timeline analysis group and the search team to assess consistency with the expanded search area. This formed the essential foundation before the investigative team moved to the phase of evaluating contradictions, determining likely directions of travel, and establishing the relevance level between statements and the scene. After the round 1 witness statements data table was fully compiled, the investigative team shifted to the task of constructing the timeline and Ethan's travel route on the night he disappeared. In order to create a standard reference time framework for cross-checking against scene findings and search results, all data was grouped into 3 categories: time points from the family, direct observations from town witnesses, and information related to vehicle movement along US 70. Investigators began with the earliest point of the day, when Ethan finished his shift in the late afternoon and returned home. The family recorded that Ethan left home for the last time sometime after 9 p.m., carrying his wallet, keys, and the cap he usually wore. This data matched the statements from the group of young people who saw Ethan and Jessica at the parking lot near the convenience store, where the two were observed standing next to the green Ford Ranger in what appeared to be a tense exchange. The time provided by this witness group ranged from 9:15 to 9:35 p.m., depending on individual recall. But despite minor variances, all indicated Ethan was still in town sometime after 9 p.m. and before 10 p.m. From the parking lot to the turn onto US 70 took only 3 to 5 minutes by car, and from there to the entrance of Croatan National Forest added another 7 to 10 minutes depending on traffic conditions. Thus, if Ethan and Jessica left town right after 9:30 p.m., the vehicle could have reached the forest turnoff between 9:30 and 9:50 p.m. Data from the residents along US 70 supported this assumption. A couple reported hearing an unusually slow vehicle around just before 10 p.m., consistent with Ethan's route if he left town via the main road. Another witness saw headlights through a window after 10:15 p.m., indicating the vehicle had gone deeper into the forest or turned onto a side road. Cross-referencing these, investigators constructed the main route. Ethan left home, met Jessica at the parking lot, traveled along US 70, turned onto the dirt road into Croatan. Given nighttime forest road conditions and the distance from US 70 to the discovered vehicle location, actual travel time deeper into the woods could range from 5 to 12 minutes, depending on speed in the meet to avoid potholes or rough sections. Thus, if the vehicle was heard near the turnoff around 10 p.m., it was highly likely it reached the deeper forest area between 10:20 p.m. From here, investigators cross-checked Jessica's statement. She claimed the incident with the strange man occurred shortly after the vehicle stopped. However, Jessica provided no precise time and only said not long after entering the forest. When placed on the timeline, the investigative team noted a significant gap. If the vehicle reached the forest area around 10:15 p.m., and Jessica only made contact much later, the period from 10:15 p.m. to nearly midnight appeared unaccounted for in any statement. This 45 to 60-minute gap became a point requiring special evaluation, as it was unexplained by any witness and lacked independent data confirming events during that window. Investigators placed this period under unverified in Level 1 timeline. In addition to time assessment, the team continued analyzing the realism of travel segments. The distance from the vehicle position to where the cap was found in the first large area search was about 480 meters in the southeast direction. This was a reasonable distance if Ethan or anyone else left the vehicle and walked along the streamside trail. However, no tracks proved Ethan moved in that direction, making this evidence a reference point insufficient to confirm the travel route. From all collected data, the Level 1 timeline diagram was constructed as follows. 1. 19,021. Ethan finished shift, returned home, prepared to meet Jessica. No unusual factors. 2. 21:05 to 21:35. Ethan met Jessica at the parking lot. Witness group confirmed both were present. 3. 21:40-21:55. Vehicle left town, traveled along US 70. At least 2 indirect witnesses heard the vehicle pass. 4. 22:22-22 vehicle entered Croatan Forest Road. Jessica's statement consistent on arrival in Forest, but unverified for subsequent events. 5. 22:20-23:20. Unaccounted time gap with no data. No statements, no tracks, no witnesses. 6. After 23:20, Jessica left the forest per her statement, but exit route unconfirmed. All this data was incorporated into a linear timeline diagram accompanied by a map illustrating the travel route, helping shape the initial investigative time framework and supporting assessment of each statement's and scene discovery's consistency. This was the mandatory foundation before moving to the next analysis phase regarding the possibility of Ethan leaving the vehicle, the possibility of a third party's presence, and the overall plausibility of the account during the unexplained time period. After the Level 1 timeline diagram was completed and the time gaps along with Ethan's likely travel route were identified, the investigative team returned to the scene that same afternoon to conduct a second survey with a basic forensic team, in order to evaluate physical traces that the initial search phase could not fully document. The forensic team's task in this phase was not to collect biological samples or perform in-depth analysis, but to observe, measure, and record mechanical signs on the ground, vegetation, and vehicle surfaces to accurately determine the scene's condition before making any assumptions about direction of travel or interactions among individuals present in the area. The team approached from the northeast, following the patrol path cleared that morning, avoiding any points previously traversed by K9 or SAR teams to prevent additional disturbance. Upon nearing the vehicle position, the forensic team divided tasks. One subgroup documented tire marks and interactions between tires and ground. The other subgroup examined changes in surrounding vegetation, including displaced brush, broken branches, or abnormally compressed leaves. The tire mark subgroup started at the dirt road where the vehicle stopped and traced the tracks to determine whether the Ford Ranger arrived via a single path or showed unusual direction changes. The tracks showed the vehicle entered from the northeast, moved slowly for about 20 to 30 meters, then stopped at the current position. Track depth was consistent with the vehicle's weight at low speed. No sharp turning marks or spinning in place impressions appeared. This indicated the vehicle did not brake suddenly or experience strong external force, contrary to the hypothesis of a stranger suddenly appearing and causing Ethan to stop in an unstable state. The forensic team examined the entire area around the tire tracks to check for signs of another vehicle. Investigators carefully inspected every compressed soil section, deep rut, drag mark, or parallel line to the main tracks. After more than 30 minutes of scanning and measuring, a preliminary conclusion was recorded. No evidence of a second vehicle at the scene, whether motorcycle, car, or ATV. The ground showed only a single path of movement by the Ford Ranger, and all nearby soft soil areas lacked signs of additional entry or exit by another vehicle. The vegetation inspection subgroup focused on a 10-meter radius around the truck, where Jessica's description placed the incident leading to Ethan exiting the vehicle. If events unfolded as described, the brush and surface leaf layer around the truck should show significant disturbance. However, on-site survey revealed only minor leaf displacement, similar to what SAR teams had noted from afar, but nothing indicating collision, struggle, or dragging. Low bushes next to the driver's door were unbroken, no freshly crushed branches, and the underlying soil remained even without excavation or deformation. Forensics closely examined the passenger side area, where Jessica claimed the stranger might have stood when approaching the vehicle. Although the area had dense foliage, the soft soil beneath should have retained impressions if someone stood or stepped heavily, but observation showed no compression meeting footprint standards. The technical team used probing rods to measure soil compaction differences across the area, but found no spot with exceptional sinking that could correlate with a person standing or stepping during the incident night. Next, the forensic team scanned a 15 to 20 meter radius for drag marks, as forced removal of Ethan would leave slide grooves, raked leaves, or widened paths. However, no slide grooves were found in any plausible direction of travel. Bushes to the west and east remained intact, with no parted leaves or branches swept aside. The team also inspected large tree trunks that might have been contacted during a struggle, but bark surfaces showed no fresh scratches. One technician examined the pine needle litter under the canopy, as needles preserved disturbance well under heavy activity, but the needle layer remained uniform with no paths of displacement. The physical observations indicated the area around the truck showed virtually no intense activity consistent with a struggle between two adults. When compiling all on-site observation data, the Level 1 forensic team concluded that the physical evidence did not match Jessica's description of an incident occurring in the forest. No second vehicle tracks, no unfamiliar footprints, no brush displacement corresponding to external approach, and absolutely no drag or struggle marks. The forensic team's conclusion report was prepared on-site and forwarded to investigators for the next evaluation step in verifying the overall plausibility of the statements and events leading up to Ethan's disappearance. After the forensic team completed the second scene survey and handed over the report documenting inconsistencies with the initial description, the investigative team returned to Jessica's Round 1 statement data to conduct a detailed cross-comparison with the already constructed Level 1 timeline. The goal of this step was not to draw conclusions, but to identify points of incompatibility between Jessica's statement and the time points, travel routes compiled from witnesses, family, and scene data. First, the investigative team placed all elements of Jessica's statement onto a pure chronological axis based on the order she described. Ethan picked her up sometime after 9 p.m. The two left town shortly afterward, drove into Croatan Forest for a private talk, and only a few minutes after the truck stopped, a strange man appeared, approached from the passenger side, causing Ethan to step out and the incident to occur. When cross-referenced with the actual timeline, investigators noted that the time the vehicle was heard by residents near US 70 did not align with the speed of events Jessica described. If the incident happened right after entering the forest, Jessica's inability to provide a contact or forest exit time created a deficit of 45 to 60 minutes. This was the first inconsistency, unexplained time gap. Next, the team examined the direction of travel Jessica described. She stated the strange man approached from the passenger side, causing Ethan to exit and be pulled into the darkness in the direction opposite the trail. However, when compared to Level 1 scene survey results, no footprints, drag marks, or vegetation disturbance existed in the direction Jessica described. This created the second inconsistency, travel direction incompatible with physical evidence. Regarding the description of the strange man, Jessica provided fairly specific details: black skin, tall, dark clothing, sudden appearance from the forest edge. But when compared to actual lighting conditions at the scene-dense forest, no artificial light, thick canopy, the investigative team questioned the accuracy of observation under those circumstances. Additionally, forensics noted that the passenger side area lacked soil compression or footprints corresponding to an adult standing there. This was the third inconsistency, the stranger's behavior, incompatible with observable physical conditions. Furthermore, investigators analyzed the sequence Jessica recounted. She described that upon the man's appearance, Ethan immediately exited the vehicle without exchange or defensive reaction. When compared to typical behavioral response models in sudden threat situations, This was deemed abnormal. However, lacking sufficient data to determine the accuracy of this description. The fourth inconsistency was recorded, Ethan's reaction inconsistent with described threat level. Continuing the comparison, investigators noted Jessica claimed she ran from the scene along forest paths but left no footprints or corresponding disturbance for someone fleeing in panic. Scene survey results showed the pine needle layer nearly pristine, with no matching escape path. This was the fifth inconsistency, no physical evidence of a flight path. When evaluating the timing of Jessica's flight, investigators cross-checked against the time she made contact as provided by the family. The interval between these points did not match the distance Jessica described walking. Sixth inconsistency, travel time incompatible with described journey. Additionally, Jessica's claim of becoming disoriented and unable to return to the truck's direction was deemed vague when compared to the topographic map. The vehicle stopping area was on a wide dirt road easily recognizable, with no complex turns nearby. This was the seventh inconsistency, disorientation description, incompatible with terrain reality. During the process of listing inconsistencies, the investigative team maintained strict neutrality, refraining from inferences beyond existing data. Each inconsistency was coded for later cross-referencing convenience, INC01 for time gap, INC02 for direction of travel, INC03 for the strange man's appearance, INC04 for Ethan's reaction, INC05 for escape route, INC06 for travel timing, and INC07 for terrain orientation. This list was saved as initial documentation, not yet used to assess Jessica's credibility or draw conclusions about the case's nature. The cross-comparison summary report was labeled Inconsistencies Set Level 1 and entered into the case file as internal working documentation. With this list, the investigative team preliminarily determined that Jessica's statement contained multiple points incompatible with real-world data and required clarification in subsequent analysis steps. However, at this stage, all information remained at the documentation level, without forming investigative opinions or conclusions regarding the accuracy of the events she described. After completing the Level 1 inconsistencies list related to Jessica's statement and cross-referencing it with the preliminary timeline, the investigative team moved to the step of analyzing the only objective data capable of establishing an accurate time anchor during the night of the incident: the 911 call log and raw positioning data from the 2001 cell tower system. First, investigators requested the Communications Division to provide the full log of the emergency call Jessica made on the night Ethan disappeared. According to the records, the call was logged at 0041, a point well after the time frame Jessica described for the incident, happening right after entering the forest. The call content clearly showed the caller's high level of panic, but it provided no coordinates or precise location description. When cross-referenced with a Level 1 timeline, investigators noted a significant discrepancy. If the incident occurred around before 22:20 as the timeline projected, the nearly 2-hour gap before Jessica contacted 911 was unusual and unexplained in any statement. This was flagged as a communications timing inconsistency, but no conclusion could be drawn at this stage. Next, to determine Jessica's approximate location when making the call, the investigative team requested connection data from the local carrier. Although 2001 cell tower-based location technology was not as precise as in later years, the system still recorded the tower to which the phone connected at the time of the 911 call. According to the provided data, Jessica's call connected the cell tower number 12, located about 2.3 miles southeast of the abandoned vehicle's position. When cross-referenced with Jessica's statement that she ran randomly toward the main road and did not travel too far, investigators recognized a clear mismatch. If she left the scene heading northeast as claimed, her device could not have connected to a tower in the southeast unless she had moved in a completely different direction. Triangulation was performed by combining signal strength information and coverage areas from 3 nearby towers. Although accuracy was limited, the method narrowed the possible sector where Jessica stood when calling 911 to an area with a radius of about 0.8 miles, far from the vehicle position and not along any route Jessica described. The report explicitly stated that the call location did not match the area Jessica claimed she reached after leaving Ethan in the forest. This was entered under cell data mismatch in the non-statement data analysis list. The investigative team continued cross-referencing the call connection time with coverage from other towers along US 70. If Jessica walked from the vehicle position to the area connecting to tower number 12, given dense forest terrain, soft mud, and limited trails, The required time would be at least 35 to 50 minutes, depending on pace. But the time Jessica left unaccounted between the incident and the call exceeded what was necessary. Investigators noted that this created another discrepancy, the difference between reasonable travel time and actual unexplained time. After completing these verification steps, the investigative team compiled the Cell Data Level 1 report, including sections on 911 call time, connected tower, possible positioning range, assumed travel time from scene to connection area, and discrepancies arising when compared to Jessica's statement. The report concluded that 2001 cell tower data could not prove the incident or Ethan's location, but it raised serious questions about Jessica's route and travel time on the night of the event. All information at this stage remained documented only, not used to draw investigative conclusions. After completing the Level 1 cell data report and identifying major discrepancies between the 911 call location and Jessica's statement, the investigative team proceeded to the suspect screening step based on the sole description Jessica provided of the strange man who appeared in Croatan Forest. Although this description had already shown multiple inconsistencies when cross-referenced with the scene, 2001 investigative protocol still required full consideration of every objective possibility, including the potential appearance of an unknown individual to the victim. Since Jessica described the perpetrator as a tall black man wearing dark clothing, the investigative team immediately began compiling a list of black male residents within a 5-mile radius of the abandoned vehicle position. This list was generated from 3 sources: Carteret County residency records, temporary lodging data from rental facilities, and reports related to local individuals with prior records or minor incidents. The initial list included 17 individuals meeting basic demographic and geographic criteria. The investigative team created an information table with columns for full name, age, address, distance from residence to vehicle position, area movement history, criminal record, current employment, and owned vehicle data. Each profile was evaluated on 3 levels: not relevant, requires further verification, and primary suspicion. Most individuals on the list were immediately eliminated due to mismatches in basic factors such as age, height, transportation, or residence too far from the forest area. Some were classified as requires verification due to history of travel near US 70 or vehicles of unclear origin, but after checking employment and alibis for the night of the incident, they were removed from suspicion. However, one name stood out after the first elimination round: Elijah Green, 27 years old, residing in a neighborhood about 1.8 miles from the vehicle position. Elijah entered the primary suspicion category due to 3 factors: geographic proximity to Croatan Forest, a minor prior record related to low-level controlled substance possession, and prior presence in the forest area for fishing or hunting as reported by neighbors. Additionally, Elijah's physical build was relatively close to Jessica's description, though that description lacked high reliability. The investigative team noted that Elijah had no prior record of violence or threatening behavior, but since protocol required verification of any possibility tied to witness description, he was moved to the primary suspicion group for the next evaluation step. Elijah's file was analyzed in greater detail. He worked part-time at a small auto repair shop, often finishing shifts late but living with his sister, making it difficult to conceal unusual travel. The only vehicle Elijah owned was an old sedan, inconsistent with the tire mark evidence recorded at the scene. However, lack of a matching vehicle was not sufficient to remove him from the list at this stage, as the investigative team still had to consider the possibility of Elijah appearing near the forest without a vehicle. Upon full data compilation, Elijah's name was placed under Primary Subject Tier 1 in the suspicion table, meaning a subject requiring verification of personal information, home presence, travel route on the incident night, and any factors related to potential presence in the Croatan Forest area. This step did not conclude Elijah's involvement or lack thereof. It only ensured the investigative process did not overlook any individual fitting the witness description. The primary suspicion list, along with individual profiles, was forwarded to the analysis team to prepare alibi checks and plausibility assessments against Ethan's disappearance timeline. After completing the suspect screening based on Jessica's description and identifying Elijah Green as a Tier 1 primary suspicion subject, the investigative team moved to the photo identification process to evaluate the match level between the witness description and individuals on the list. Per 2001 regulations, photo lineups were still widely used in cases involving identification of strangers, although standards for image quality control, lighting, and layout were not yet strictly enforced as in later periods. The investigative team prepared a lineup of 6 photos, selecting black males of similar age ranges while attempting to minimize excessive differences in hairstyle or clothing. However, since source photos came from county residency and administrative records of uneven quality, facial sizes in the images showed clear variations. Some photos were close-ups with strong lighting that highlighted facial features, while others were distant, low quality, or blurry from scanning old documents. Elijah Green's image was positioned second in the 6-photo array, but due to non-standard arrangement, his photo was smaller and dimmer than 4 of the remaining 6. Although this did not meet modern lineup standards, which require uniform lighting and size across all photos, the investigative team proceeded with the identification because no strict binding regulations existed at the time. Once the lineup was prepared, Jessica was invited to the sheriff's office for the procedure. The process was briefly explained as a step to confirm whether any of the individuals matched the strangers she described appearing in Croatan Forest. Jessica was instructed not to discuss or re-describe the event, but to focus solely on observing each photo. She was taken to a small room where the 6-photo lineup was laid out horizontally on a table. The investigator asked her to examine each photo carefully and indicate if any resembled the person she saw on the incident night. As Jessica began viewing, the investigative team noted she spent considerable time on the second photo, Elijah's. Despite its lower quality and darker appearance compared to the others, Jessica pointed to it and stated the man in the photo was the one who appeared near Ethan's truck. The investigator asked Jessica if she was certain of this choice, and she replied that this face is the most similar to the one she remembered. No regulation at the time required certainty assessment on a scale as in later improved procedures, so Jessica's affirmation was recorded verbatim in the minutes. Notably, Jessica's identification of Elijah from a non-standard lineup allowed his name to move from primary suspicion to a subject requiring deeper verification. The investigative team immediately noted Jessica's selection in the case file and prepared the photo lineup result level 1 report, stating, Elijah Green was identified as having an appearance similar to the person Jessica described. The report also documented lineup conditions: 6 photos not uniform in quality, no lighting control applied, and no standard instruction to the witness that the perpetrator might not be in the lineup, an important factor, but not yet considered mandatory procedure in 2001. After recording the identification result, the investigative team entered this information under primary subject elevated tier in the suspicion list, meaning Elijah became a subject requiring detailed evaluation of alibi, schedule, travel, and factors related to possible presence in Croatan Forest on the night Ethan disappeared. Jessica's identification of Elijah was not treated as conclusive evidence, but per investigative protocol of the era, it carried sufficient weight to place Elijah at the center of the suspicion group. Investigators further noted that although Jessica's initial description was vague and unstable, her selection of Elijah in the lineup compelled them to allocate resources to examine his case more seriously. After completion, the lineup was preserved as a hard copy in the case file, with notes on presentation method. The data entry department also created a technical file confirming that this lineup did not meet uniformity standards for layout, photo quality, and lighting, but since 2001 had no binding regulation on this, it was not deemed a procedural violation. The identification result was immediately forwarded to the suspect analysis team to prepare the next step in the verification chain related to Elijah. After the photo lineup result was documented and Elijah Green was elevated to priority verification subject status, the investigative team shifted to evaluating his alibi for the night Ethan disappeared to determine whether his presence in the Croatan Forest area was feasible. The first step was verifying Elijah's residence information. He lived with his sister in a house about 1.8 miles east of Ethan's Ford Ranger position, in a small, low-density residential area with roads primarily secondary connectors to US 70. Elijah was recorded working at an auto repair shop on the edge of Havelock, where he typically left shifts around 7 p.m. The investigative team contacted the shop owner to verify end-of-shift time, and the owner confirmed Elijah left work on schedule the night of the incident with no unusual behavior. The period from 7 p.m. to the suspected time frame, around 10 p.m., was identified as needing close scrutiny. To verify Elijah's whereabouts after work, investigators approached acquaintances in his neighborhood. They quickly reached Elijah's group of friends, who stated that on that night, Elijah attended a small gathering in a friend's backyard. The group's statements indicated they assembled from around 8 p.m. until nearly midnight, chatting and having light refreshments, with Elijah present throughout. To corroborate, the investigative team interviewed each group member individually, 6 people, total, including 3 neighbors, 2 former co-workers, and 1 distant relative. All provided matching times with only minor minute-level variances due to recall. But all confirmed Elijah did not leave the gathering for any extended period and showed no sign of departing to go elsewhere during the time frame potentially overlapping Ethan's incident. They described Elijah participating in group activities from 9 to 10 p.m., standing in the yard, conversing, and being continuously visible to those present. One witness stated Elijah was helping prepare the grill around 9:45 p.m., a detail that further narrowed the possibility of Elijah reaching the Croatan Forest position within the timeline overlap. However, during information compilation, the investigative team noted a notable issue. Initial records listed only one witness confirming Elijah's alibi, despite 6 individuals actually interviewed and providing similar statements. Upon rechecking documents entered into the initial system, investigators discovered this omission did not stem from witness statements, but from initial data being recorded in abbreviated form that failed to reflect the full number and consistency of statements. This shortfall reduced alibi reliability when cross-referenced with other documents, as the official file recorded only one witness, an unusual point requiring immediate correction in the alibi report. After re-verifying all statements, the investigative team created a time comparison table based on the 6 witnesses. The earliest confirmed sighting of Elijah was 7:50 p.m. upon arrival at the gathering. The latest recorded was around 11 p.m. when Elijah left the gathering and walked home. This time window covered most of the disappearance timeline points. Investigators continued assessing geographic feasibility. Per area maps, the straight-line distance from the gathering location to Ethan's vehicle position was about 2.4 miles and 3.1 miles by foot. Given forest terrain and nighttime conditions, it was implausible for Elijah to appear in Croatan Forest between 10 and 10:20 p.m., as projected by the timeline, as this would require him to leave the group undetected, travel quickly through dark sections, and return without anyone noticing his absence. No witness reported Elijah leaving the area during the gathering, and none observed signs of fatigue, mud, dirt, or unusual behavior on him. Compiling all statements, the investigative team prepared the Alibi Report, Level 1, stating, Elijah Green had an alibi confirmed by 6 independent witnesses, with consistent and stable timing, high-time coverage, and very low feasibility of leaving the gathering to appear in the forest per terrain and travel speed analysis. However, the report also emphasized that the initial file recording only one witness was a procedural error requiring correction in the official record. This report was entered into the suspicion file for use in subsequent evaluation steps in the investigation process. After completing Elijah's Level 1 alibi report and transferring the information to the file to separate investigative directions, search forces were redeployed to Croatan Forest to implement the final expanded search phase within the projected operational range of the missing person per the lost person behavior model. This phase focused on areas not thoroughly swept in the previous 2 search rounds, primarily deep ravines scattered in the southwest sector of the search radius, exposed rock ledges on northeast slopes, and small enclosed ponds hidden under dense forest canopy where ground was prone to sinking. Although Level 1 forensic results showed no signs of Ethan's movement around the vehicle, SAR protocol still required sweeping all areas with potential for accident or entrapment to ensure no field evidence was overlooked. The SAR coordination team began by marking the 2 incompletely checked quadrants as southwest and northeast, while the southeast and northwest quadrants had been thoroughly swept in the first large area search. The remaining 2 contained harder-to-access terrain with higher brush density, requiring a tighter search formation. Forces were divided into 3 groups: Ravine Survey Team, Rockledge Survey Team, and Enclosed Pond Survey Team. The Ravine Team was equipped with safety lines and probing poles to check sections cut by seasonal rainwater flows, where a pedestrian could slip or become trapped in darkness. They inspected from ravine edges to bottoms, searching for physical traces such as torn fabric, plastic fragments, slide marks, or footprints preserved in damp mud. However, most ravines in the area were dry and showed no foreign objects indicating a fall or passage during the incident night. Large trees near ravine edges also lacked fresh slide marks, and leaf litter at the bottoms remained uniform with no abnormal compression points. The Rockledge Survey Team moved to the high terrain of the northeast quadrant, where eroded rock protruded above ground, forming natural steps. This was an area capable of causing injury if the missing person wandered at night. The search team swept each rock ledge, using strong lights to check for fresh chips or impact marks, but recorded no signs of slipping or hand gripping on surfaces. Additionally, moss covering the rock remained intact, indicating no recent disturbance. The enclosed pond survey team small scattered water bodies under low canopy used long poles to probe depths and search for submerged objects. Since these ponds often retain floating or fallen items from shores, finding nothing beyond decayed branches and fallen leaves further reinforced the conclusion that Ethan did not leave the vehicle in a manner leading to accident at these water bodies. Some ponds were checked with small inflatable boats, but bottom mud and surface samples contained no related objects. In parallel with the three main groups, SAR teams continued sweeping flat ground areas in the two unswept quadrants. Each team used smaller grids than previous searches to ensure denser coverage for detecting subtle traces. They observed leaf compression marks, broken roots, split grass, or minor changes in pine needle layers, signs that should appear if someone passed through. However, the entire area still showed no new movement evidence. The SAR command team noted that the clean level of the distance seen matched the near-vehicle area, no clear footprints, no paths cut through brush, no scattered personal items. This further reduced the probability of Ethan leaving the vehicle position on foot. After completing ravine, rock ledge, and pond sweeps, the coordination team ordered all groups back to the rally point to update the expanded search map. Grids not swept in prior rounds were marked complete. The overall map showed the entire 1.5-mile radius from the vehicle position, including high-risk areas such as ravines, ponds, rock ledges, trails. Soft ground had been swept at least twice using independent search techniques. High suspicion zones were even searched by two different teams at different times of day to avoid light-related bias. Since no additional evidence was found beyond the earlier cap, the coordination team concluded the final expanded search yielded no new data on Ethan's presence after leaving the vehicle. This result was recorded in the Search Expansion Report, Phase 3, stating that with the coverage level and search duration implemented, no physical basis existed proving Ethan moved within the range assessed as reasonable per lost person behavior model. The report also confirmed no accident signs, no entrapment signs, and no victim-related objects appeared in the expanded search area. With no further data found in unswept zones, the coordination team officially concluded that SAR forces did not locate Ethan across the full evaluated range reasonable for a missing person's movement capability within the allowed time, completing the final expanded search phase per standard protocol. After the final expanded search phase concluded without recovering any additional traces or evidence beyond the cap found earlier, the investigative team conducted a final comprehensive review in early 2003 to assess the feasibility of continuing to handle Ethan Caldwell's disappearance as an active case. The SAR Force report, Level 1 forensic file, Level 1 timeline table, cell tower data, and Elijah Green's alibi verification results were all presented at an interagency evaluation session involving the Investigations Division, Search Team, and County Prosecutor's Office. The overall conclusion indicated the case had reached a severe impasse, no body or any physical evidence proving Ethan had left the scene in any direction, no clear signs of criminal activity at the vehicle or within the search perimeter, and no objective evidence linking any specific individual to his disappearance. The absence of a body prevented the investigative team from determining the legal nature of the case, whether it involved criminal action, accident, voluntary departure, or an unclassifiable situation. Although Jessica's statements contained numerous contradictions, there was no direct evidence proving her involvement in the disappearance or harm to Ethan. The inconsistencies only reflected instability in her account, but were insufficient to form a basis for charges, especially under the legal standards of the time requiring clear physical proof. Similarly, although Elijah Green had been placed in the suspicion group following the photo lineup result, his alibi was confirmed by 6 independent witnesses, and the full area search produced no evidence supporting his presence near Croatan Forest on the night Ethan vanished. The investigative team concluded there were insufficient legal grounds to continue viewing Elijah as a suspect or to recommend criminal prosecution against him or any other individual. The Level 1 forensic report, which indicated the scene was completely inconsistent with Jessica's description, was also insufficient to designate Jessica as an official suspect, as the lack of a body, violence traces, or any material evidence prevented authorities from affirming that a crime had occurred. The county prosecutor's office stated that pursuing charges under such evidentiary deficiencies would not persuade a jury and would not meet minimum legal standards. Therefore, the case could not proceed under traditional criminal investigation protocols. In the final meeting of the active investigation phase, the dedicated team determined the file had reached the limit of feasible measures. All logical avenues had ended without new data, no additional witnesses, no new evidence, no signs of Ethan's movement beyond the vehicle, no supplementary carrier positioning data, and no indications of criminal activity by any examined individual. In this condition, the file no longer had sufficient operational basis to maintain active investigation status. By spring 2003, the Sheriff's Office officially issued notice transferring Ethan Caldwell's missing person file to the cold case unit, where unresolved cases are archived and only reactivated upon new evidence or new technical reports from specialized units. The transfer followed procedure. All scene documents, forensic reports, timeline tables, suspect lists, lineup results, 911 recordings, and 2001 cell tower data were packaged, recoded, and handed over to the cold case office per contemporary standards. In the summary report, the investigative team stated clearly, no direct evidence of crime, insufficient grounds to charge Jessica Marlowe or Elijah Green, no reasonable basis to continue active investigation absent recovery of victim evidence or body. The official file was closed and added to the county's cold case roster in April 2003, marking the complete impasse phase of Ethan Caldwell's disappearance in contemporary investigative records. By 2006, when a county cold case unit completed reclassification of unresolved missing persons cases in eastern North Carolina, Ethan Caldwell's file was forwarded to the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation Review Group for its first re-examination, per periodic protocol to determine whether any technical elements or overlooked evidence existed from the initial investigation phase. The review group consisted of 3 veteran SBI investigators, plus 1 assigned forensic technician tasked with evaluating the entire file against criteria, including completeness of scene reports, evidence handling standards, identification procedure quality, statement consistency, timeline validity, and adequacy of suspect screening. Upon receiving the file, the review group immediately noted that many core documents from the initial investigation phase lacked systematic organization. The first scene report did not detail tire condition, precise locations of compressed soil areas, or distances from the vehicle to trails. SAR search maps existed only as handwritten notes. Preliminary quadrant sketches lacked accompanying GPS coordinates, and no advanced-level scene report followed the file. When cross-referencing the evidence list, the review group observed that only the cap was documented, but there were no close-up photographs of the evidence at recovery time, no detailed condition description of the item, and no record of chain of custody sealing process. Regarding Ethan's vehicle, the Level 1 forensic file focused solely on ground surface and vegetation observation without including fingerprint sampling, fiber collection, cabin soil samples, or external scratch analysis. This made it difficult for the review group to verify whether evidence omission resulted from an empty scene or from incomplete initial procedures. Continuing to examine photo lineup documents, the review group recorded that the lineup failed to meet SBI 2006 procedural guidelines for image control and layout. 6 photos inconsistent in quality, no notation on lineup presentation to the witness, and especially no minutes assessing Jessica's certainty level when identifying Elijah Green. The review group noted this as an error potentially affecting identification validity if the case were later reopened. Regarding witness statements, the review group documented the lack of thorough cross-referencing between Jessica's statements and objective data, but emphasized that the original investigative team had not exceeded its authority, as the absence of a body prevented treating the case as criminal. However, the review group assessed the failure to fully document the number of alibi witnesses for Elijah as a clear procedural error, reducing suspicion file accuracy. When cross-referencing the entire timeline, the review group observed the over 45-minute unexplained gap remained unaddressed in any report. With no effort to expand 911 data collection or re-verify cell data in later stages. However, given 2001 positioning technology limitations, the review group evaluated that recovering cell tower data by 2006 was virtually impossible. After completing the review process lasting over 3 weeks, the review group issued an official conclusion in the summary report. The file contained numerous documentation deficiencies, but no new elements sufficient to trigger reopening under SBI cold case standards. No body, no supplementary evidence, no new witnesses, and no technical data reanalyzable with 2006 technology. Therefore, Ethan Caldwell's disappearance remained classified as a cold case ineligible for reinvestigation and was returned to the County Cold Case Unit for continued archiving. By 2010, when the SBI Image Forensics Division launched a low-resolution photo recovery program for older cold cases, Ethan Caldwell's file was included in the test list due to recorded scene photographs of low quality, insufficient for analysis during 2001-2003. The technical team began by digitizing all original scene photos at native resolution, then applied newly developed image restoration algorithms including detail sharpening, noise-reduced dynamic range recovery, and edge enhancement. Although blurry images could not be transformed into perfectly sharp ones, 2010 technology enabled recovery of many details previously difficult for the naked eye to discern. When restoring photographs of Ethan's driver's door, the technical team detected differential blur levels on the door handle edge, indicating the object had been touched multiple times between the vehicle stopping and the photograph time. Uneven dust reflection on the handle suggested the driver's door had been opened more than once, not just a single instance as implied by Jessica's account of the incident sequence. Additionally, restored images showed dust accumulation on the lower door edge appeared lightly swept in two different directions, one from inside outward and one from outside inward, mismatching any prior description. Continuing analysis of the ground beneath the driver's door, the technical team used contrast range enhancement filters to clarify soil marks. Results revealed soil compression in two distinct zones approximately 40 centimeters apart, with sharper compression edges closer to the vehicle body. This indicated two stable standing positions lasting several seconds or longer, directly contradicting Jessica's description of Ethan being immediately pulled from the vehicle. A sudden forceful pull would produce drag or elongated compression patterns in the direction of motion. However, the soil mark distribution in the photographs showed both individuals or two different standing positions remained stationary long enough to create distinct compression zones on soft ground. When analyzing soil marks on the passenger side where Jessica claimed the strange man appeared, the technical team observed no compression consistent with an adult's weight standing beside the passenger door. Instead, faint compression zones appeared more than a meter farther away, offset from Jessica's described position. Although these compressions were not clear enough to confirm a person standing there, they indicated that if approach occurred, it did not happen at the position Jessica stated, and the compression distribution was entirely incompatible with being pulled into the forest opposite the trail direction. The technical team also restored a wide-angle photograph of the forest floor immediately adjacent to the vehicle. In the image, low canopy foliage retained fairly uniform structure, with no cleared paths or major displacement indicating passage shortly before the photo was taken. When sharpening the right edge region of the image, the team observed pine needles fallen in a consistent direction, without sweeping or clumping signs typically present in struggle or dragging scenarios. From this, the technical team concluded the ground and vegetation showed no evidence consistent with the described struggle or person being pulled into the forest. Compiling all findings, the technical team prepared the Level 1 image analysis report, highlighting 3 points. The driver's door showed signs of multiple openings, soil marks contradicted the pulled-into forest description, and no approach evidence existed at the position Jessica indicated. However, the report also stated these findings were insufficient to reopen the file under SBI standards due to no new physical evidence, no victim indicators, an inability to determine cause of disappearance based solely on photographic analysis. The report was archived in the cold case file with a note that if future advanced imaging technology or new evidence emerged, the restored photographs could be reanalyzed to clarify events around Ethan's vehicle. By early 2016, after North Carolina implemented a statewide long-term missing persons file reassessment program to prioritize cases by risk level and data recovery potential, Ethan Caldwell's file, which had remained in cold case for over 13 years, was placed on the list requiring in-depth review due to the unusual scene characteristics, inconsistent time markers, incomplete preliminary forensics, and multiple unresolved contradictions never fully addressed. The Carteret County Case Review Committee, in coordination with SBI and Prosecutor's Office representatives, re-examined the entire cold case roster and unanimously approved reopening Ethan's file under newly issued standards requiring re-evaluation with current forensic technology for cases with unanalyzed scene data, contradictory statements, or initial procedural technical errors. Upon approval, the Cold Case Division assembled all original data including 2001 scene photographs, Level 1 forensic reports, SAR search maps, witness lists, 911 recordings, 2001 cell data, photo lineup documents, statement reports, and 2003 interagency minutes. Some records had degraded, photos blurred, and paper documents worn over time, so a digitization team was mobilized to restore electronic versions at maximum clarity possible. Once all data was compiled, the cold case chief proposed forming a new investigative team consisting of members who had no prior involvement in any phase of the original investigation to ensure absolute objectivity. The new team included a lead investigator experienced in long-term missing persons cases, a current scene forensic specialist, a behavioral and timeline analysis expert, a digital data technician, and an SAR representative to assist with terrain context reconstruction. The new team's objective was to evaluate the entire file from a fresh starting point, relying solely on existing real data and 2016 modern investigative techniques without deference to prior conclusions. In the first meeting, the new team reviewed each section of the file and quickly identified critical deficiencies. Level 1 scene report lacked comparative data. No physical samples from the vehicle were sealed beyond surface notes, no soil chemistry or trace analysis around the vehicle. Jessica's statements contained contradictions never fully forensically cross-referenced. Photo lineup non-compliant, cell tower data never reanalyzed with modern technology. And notably, the entire file lacked any verified evidence of Ethan's actual movement direction on the disappearance night. When analyzing the evidence list, the team noted only the cap was documented, but without recovery procedure details, in situ photographs, or any DNA or trace fiber analysis ever performed. This prompted the forensic team to request retrieval of the cap from storage to determine whether the evidence remained viable for 2016 technology processing. The team also re-examined all witness statements and identified key unresolved points, particularly timeline gaps, Jessica's 911 call location mismatching her description, and the implausibility between her account and the terrain conditions around the vehicle. Therefore, the team agreed that re-interviewing witnesses was necessary, especially given discrepancies between statements and prior technical analyses. Re-interviews aimed to determine whether witness memory had changed, whether new contradictions emerged, and whether any overlooked data existed. In addition, the forensic lead proposed conducting in-depth analysis per 2016 scene standards. Although the physical scene was no longer pristine, it could still be exploited from scene photographs. SAR maps recovered soil marks and other indirect indicators. The goal was to reconstruct vehicle position, door opening direction, possible movement vectors around the vehicle, potential footstep paths, and ground condition at photo time to assess the credibility of the pulled-into-forest description. The team also considered using GIS technology to recreate the 2001 forest map, as Croatan's vegetation structure had changed over years, and satellite data could assist in analyzing trails, unofficial paths, and plausible pedestrian movement corridors. Beyond forensics and statements, the team paid special attention to a major deficiency in the original investigation. No cabin processing report, no fingerprint analysis, no third-party presence evaluation inside the vehicle, and no detailed report on seat condition, steering wheel, gear shift, or Ethan's personal items. This placed high priority on locating the vehicle, as if it remained in county evidence storage, new trace recovery potential still existed. In the summary review meeting, the team determined the file could no longer be treated as a disappearance without criminal indicators. The inconsistencies between Jessica's statements, timeline, cell data, soil marks, and recovered scene analysis were sufficient to classify the case for reopening under 2016 enhanced cold case standards. All this was documented in the reopening recommendation report, concluding that the file met reopening criteria. In-depth forensic analysis was required, full witness re-interview was necessary, and all evidence needed re-examination with new technology. With formal approval from the prosecutor's office, Ethan Caldwell's file was officially reopened in June 2016. Marking the first time since 2003 the case left storage status and returned to active investigation with an entirely new team and broader analytical scope. After Ethan Caldwell's file was officially reopened in 2016 and the new investigative team reclassified all data, one of the highest priority tasks was re-evaluating the statement of Jessica Marlowe, the sole witness and the last known person to have seen Ethan before his disappearance. The team determined that virtually every conclusion, analytical direction, and assumption built during the original investigation depended almost entirely on Jessica's statement. Therefore, reassessing her account with modern techniques was not only necessary but critical to determine whether the file had been misdirected for the past 15 years. As the first step, the team collected all original 2001 audio recordings, including the disappearance night recording, the first formal interview at the sheriff's office, and follow-up statements recorded months after the file entered impasse status. These audio segments were digitized and noise-cleaned using 2016 forensic audio software to prepare for the next analysis phase, voice stress analysis. This technology measures microvibrations in voice, vocal cord frequency tremors, interspersed breathing patterns, and standard deviation points in speech to detect potential concealment, evasion, fabrication inconsistent with reality, or information inconsistent with normal psychological state. When conducting voice stress analysis on the 2001 statements, the technical team detected numerous anomalies. Segments where Jessica described the strange man showed stress amplitude significantly above baseline, sentence pauses, breathing rhythm disruptions, and keyword repetition spikes increased sharply, and particularly, vocal tension exceeded norms in passages describing Ethan being pulled from the vehicle levels incompatible with her recorded state in sections about herself. This suggested stress not stemming from genuine memory but possibly from reconstructing a narrative. Further analysis of Jessica's second statement, recorded days after the event, revealed an unstable story structure. Multiple core details changed regarding the stranger's position, lighting, distance, and Ethan's behavior. Although detail variation can occur in shock witnesses, simultaneous changes to multiple central elements were inconsistent with genuine eyewitness statement patterns. The specialist team assessed that the continuous structural shifts resulted not from memory pressure, but from lacking a real event foundation to anchor to. The analysis group then compared 2001-2006 statements with re-interviews conducted in 2016. All statements were processed through voice comparison modules. Results show Jessica tended to repeat certain descriptive clusters in the same rhythm and volume regardless of question context, suggesting use of a memorized story template rather than recall from actual memory. This repetition appeared in descriptions of 3 points: the appearance of the black man being pulled from the vehicle and fleeing through the forest. When experts graphed stress over time, those 3 segments displayed identical patterns: high stress during description, low during self-related narration, and rising again when referencing Ethan's attack details. This matched analysis models for witnesses attempting to maintain a fabricated narrative without perfectly modulating physiological speech rhythms. The team then cross-referenced 2001 to 2006 statement content with 2016 re-interview content. Although Jessica attempted to maintain the same story, the analysis team observed a clear decline in logical coherence when she answered detailed questions, especially those concerning time, distance, and position. She could not precisely identify when the vehicle stopped, could not describe forest movement direction, and even altered the number of times she claimed to have seen the stranger. Notably, in the new interview, Jessica disclosed she was not sure about the lighting that night, contradicting her 2001 statement where she said she clearly saw the man standing by the vehicle. The team assessed this as a significant indicator. When confronted with new image examination context near zero visibility in darkness, Jessica began retracting details she had previously asserted confidently. Beyond voice and narrative structure analysis, the team applied the narrative deception model to evaluate continuity, emotional detail density, and spatial reference levels. Analyses show Jessica's statements had high emotional description density in unimportant sections and sparse factual detail in essential sections. This reversed the trajectory of genuine witness statements, which prioritize accurate spatial and action details over emotion. Additionally, the analysis team identified a looping structure in Jessica's narrative. Whenever questioned about a contradiction, she reverted to describing the strange man rather than directly answering. This is a characteristic evasion pattern in fabrication models. All analysis results: story structure changes, inconsistent logic, deliberate repetition, and unrealistic description levels were incorporated into the Behavioral and Verbal Analysis Report 2016. The report concluded that Jessica's statements showed clear signs of fabrication, incompatible with scene data, timeline, photo analysis, soil marks, and cell data. With these findings, The investigative team unanimously reclassified Jessica from sole witness to Tier 1 primary suspect and noted that subsequent investigation must focus on her behavior, potential motives, and possible direct involvement in Ethan Caldwell's disappearance. After Jessica was officially reclassified as the primary suspect and the 2016 statement analysis report revealed numerous signs of fabrication, the investigative team decided to move to Level 2 forensic examination of Ethan Caldwell's Ford Ranger, which had remained stored in the county evidence warehouse and had never undergone any advanced forensic processing. 2016 forensic technology allowed analysis of faded traces, detection of changes in material surface structure, and retrieval of soil DNA, adhering to the vehicle techniques that did not exist or were not applied in 2001. When the vehicle was brought into the examination room, the technical team's first step was to use luminol to test the entire cabin, floor, steering wheel, gear shift, armrest recesses, and seat surfaces. Although the 2001 file recorded no blood traces or violence evidence, the forensic team proceeded with testing and case trace amounts had been overlooked. When the lab lights were turned off and luminol sprayed, there was no characteristic glow reaction indicative of human blood or similar organic material on the floor, seats, or steering wheel. But the technical team detected several weak glowing points along the lower edge of the driver's door and on the plastic trim near the accelerator pedal. These glow points were not strong enough to confirm a hemoglobin reaction, but sufficient for the team to note that those locations had once had contact with organic material that had been washed away or degraded over time. The next step involved soil DNA analysis by collecting soil samples still adhering to the undercarriage, tires, and lower door edges positions that typically retain movement traces after the vehicle stops. Soil DNA allowed determination of whether the samples matched the soil from the 2001 discovery location and whether soil from another area was present, suggesting the vehicle had been moved afterward. When the soil samples underwent environmental DNA extraction, results showed two distinct soil sources, one matching the characteristics of the Croatan Forest road soil where the vehicle was found, and a second source with mineral composition, pH, and grain structure that did not match any samples collected at the scene. The characteristics of the second soil source better aligned with roadside asphalt-adjacent soil or a residential parking area, indicating the vehicle had passed through another location after the initial event. This directly contradicted Jessica's statement, in which she asserted the vehicle stopped at a single point and no one other than Ethan operated it throughout that evening. Soil DNA analysis also showed the Croatan soil layer overlying the foreign soil layer, meaning the foreign soil appeared first and the Croatan soil second, with the vehicle only stopping at the Croatan location after passing through another area. This became a critical finding. The vehicle did not travel directly from town into the forest as Jessica described, but stopped at an intermediate location before entering Croatan. To further clarify vehicle use that night, the forensic team conducted mechanical analysis of the driver's seat. They measured seat slide position, backrest angle, and steering wheel grip force factors that could indicate a driver with different height, posture, or seat adjustment habits. Technicians determined the driver's seat was adjusted 3.5 inches farther back than Ethan's habitual driving position, as confirmed by family and friends. The original 2001 report made no mention of seat position, but information from Ethan's mother and close friend confirmed he always positioned the seat closer to the wheel due to his average height and preference for an upright sitting posture. The current seat configuration was consistent with a driver 2 to 4 inches taller than Ethan. Additionally, wear patterns on the seat cushion indicated the occupant had shifted weight more to the left than Ethan's balanced sitting habit. When examining the steering wheel, the forensic team detected fresh wear marks on the upper portion of the wheel, a position Ethan did not typically grip, according to descriptions from his late father. These wear marks showed rotation angles consistent with a taller driver. Combining soil DNA, luminol, and seat position analysis, the forensic team concluded the vehicle had been operated by someone other than Ethan during the period between when he left home and when it was found in Croatan Forest. More importantly, the trace patterns on the seat and wheel indicated the last person in the driver's seat was taller than Ethan, did not sit upright, and shifted weight differently. These technical findings were documented in the Vehicle Forensic Analysis Level 2 report, which stated clearly, no scientific basis supports the assumption that Ethan was the last person to operate the vehicle. Conversely, forensic data indicate manipulation by another individual, consistent with a movement pattern prior to stopping at the Croatan location, and completely contradictory to Jessica Marlowe's statement. The report was forwarded to the investigative team, marking a significant turning point in assessing the credibility of the primary witness's statement and opening new analytical directions for the events of Ethan's disappearance night. After the Level 2 forensic analysis of the Ford Ranger confirmed Ethan was not the last person to drive the vehicle and showed it had been taken to an intermediate location before stopping in Croatan Forest, the investigative team expanded the forest scene analysis, using advanced geophysical technology to determine the possibility of burial sites or concealed traces beneath the thick vegetation layer. Since Croatan is a vast forest with complex terrain, manual searching of every area was not feasible, so the team deployed two primary technologies: drone LiDAR to detect minute terrain deformations under the canopy, and GPR to survey subsurface soil structure for signs of non-natural digging and filling. First, the LiDAR team established a flight map using specialized drones capable of penetrating the canopy and collecting elevation data at centimeter resolution. The scanned area focused on a 500-meter radius around the vehicle position, the zone most likely directly related to Ethan's disappearance point, based on prior behavioral and forensic analysis. When LiDAR data was processed, the digital map displayed thousands of ground elevation points, completely eliminating canopy influence. The terrain group began comparing ground surfaces across adjacent forest sections and identified three anomalous areas: small oval depressions with elevation differences of only 5 to 12 centimeters, but shapes not conforming to the forest's natural structure. These deformations measured approximately 1.6 to 1.9 meters in length dimensions, close to the shape of a human body lying extended. More importantly, each area had slightly raised soil edges typical of digging, filling, and subsequent natural erosion over time. When these three areas were marked on the topographic map for cross-referencing, the GIS team noted all three were located near unofficial trails, small paths not appearing on the 2001 SAR maps, but potentially existing at the time of Ethan's disappearance. This increased the likelihood that someone moving that night may have used these trails to transport something or conceal activity. To verify the LiDAR findings, the investigative team decided to conduct GPR surveys at each point. The GPR unit was tuned to medium frequency for penetration of 1 to 3 meters below ground, suitable for detecting disturbed soil structures or shallow burial pits. Scanning the first anomalous point, GPR signals showed a curved, heterogeneous, disturbed layer characteristic of an area that had been dug and then compacted. Beneath the disturbed layer, radar detected a small void response area, suggesting density change typically present if an object had decomposed or been removed below. The second anomalous point produced similar signals. The topsoil layer showed two distinct strata, the upper horizontal but the lower compressed into thick blocks, inconsistent with natural Croatan forest soil patterns. The abnormal density contrast led the geophysical team to flag this as a probable dig and fill area. At the third anomalous point, radar signals were stronger. Beneath the compacted layer, GPR detected an elongated, curved reflective surface over 1.5 meters. Along with a small void line running along one side, classic signs of an old collapsed burial pit. Although GPR could not confirm the presence of an object or body below, the signal morphology differed markedly from root cavities or natural sinkholes. Compiling GPR and LiDAR data, the investigative team determined all three anomalous areas exhibited characteristics of human soil intervention, inconsistent with natural forest processes and absent from Croatan's historical topographic maps. With this information, the team created the Potential Burial Site Map 2016, marking the three suspect locations and classifying them by anomaly level. The third position had the highest suspicion level, while the first and second were medium. All technical data was documented in the LiDAR GPR Terrain Disturbance Analysis Report, which stated clearly that the identified terrain deformations could not be explained by ordinary natural phenomena and showed signs of manual digging and filling activity. However, the report also noted no conclusion could be drawn about the nature of these areas, as the technology only identified changed soil structure, not cause. Nevertheless, this discovery marked a major turning point. For the first time since 2001, physical evidence appeared beyond the cap and vehicle, opening the possibility that Ethan's true location might lie in one of the areas detected by drone LiDAR and GPR. The report was immediately forwarded to the investigative team to prepare the next handling step. After drone LiDAR and GPR identified three areas with anomalous digging and filling signs in Croatan Forest, The investigative team shifted to reevaluating Jessica's entire statement from a criminal behavioral perspective while inviting the SBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, BAU, to participate in analyzing fabrication patterns in missing persons cases involving concealment elements. The BAU began by constructing 3 baseline scenarios commonly seen in similar disappearances: an accident between acquaintances leading to concealment behavior, an unintentional death incident followed by a fabricated story to avoid liability, and an attack by a stranger resulting in the victim's disappearance. By comparing Jessica's statement to each model, the BAU sought to determine fit or elimination of each scenario. First, the group analyzed the stranger attack model precisely as Jessica described. In genuine stranger in the woods cases, common behavioral features include witnesses typically providing detailed perpetrator movement descriptions due to the sudden event, strong behavioral reactions from the victim or companion, and the scene always showing minimal physical traces such as footprints, soil disturbance, broken branches, or scattered items along the escape path. When cross-referenced, the BAU found Jessica's statement mismatched every characteristic of this model: no stranger footprints, no soil disturbance corresponding to her described direction, no collision or struggle signs around the vehicle, and most importantly, no indication whatsoever of an additional person standing near the passenger door. Additionally, Jessica's reported reaction was overly calibrated, describing panic but lacking natural details genuine victims typically recall, such as smells, sounds, distances, or movement speed. This led BAU to conclude the stranger attacker model was unsuitable even at the behavioral level. The BAU then moved to the second model, unintentional accident resulting in victim death, followed by the companion fabricating a story to avoid legal responsibility. In cases fitting this model, behavioral hallmarks include the sole present person statement containing logical contradictions, key details repeated with high stability despite varying question contexts, significant timeline gaps, little or no struggle evidence at the scene, and the witness tending to introduce an unverifiable stranger perpetrator to distance themselves from the event. When cross-referencing Jessica's data, the BAU noted substantial alignment. Her statement had a loop story structure around 3 fixed points. Timeline contained an unexplainable 45 to 60-minute gap. Soil marks around the vehicle showed no struggle, contradicting her description. Cell data indicated her call location mismatched her claimed route, and particularly, voice stress analysis showed elevated vocal tension in passages describing the stranger, matching fabrication patterns to remove oneself from the incident context. The BAU also noted a key behavioral factor. In accident concealment models, the fabricator often creates an unverifiable perpetrator with generic but easily assignable traits, such as describing a strange man in darkness. Jessica did this consistently across all 2001-2016 statements. Despite varying details on movement direction, lighting, and perpetrator position, the BAU assessed this as a classic sign of constructing a false perpetrator template not based on actual observation. Finally, the BAU analyzed the deliberate scripting model in which the witness fabricates a story from the outset with full elements to mislead investigation. In this model, statements typically exhibit 3 feature groups: more emotional than factual description, factual details changing over time but core story unchanged, and witness responses to contradiction questions repeating prior descriptions rather than providing new information to avoid exposing weaknesses. When compared, the BAU found Jessica's statement fit almost perfectly. She described fear, but not space. She changed the stranger's position, but not his behavior. When asked about time, she repeated old descriptions instead of answering directly. And story structure was circular rather than linear, matching scripted fabrication. Additionally, the BAU noted that in many fabrication cases, the witness creates high-drama details to divert attention from themselves. The description of a black man appearing in the forest is a classic example, especially with no other witnesses in the area, making verification nearly impossible. Compiling all analysis, the BAU concluded Jessica's account did not match any behavioral model of stranger-perpetrated crime. Conversely, it aligns strongly with accident concealment or deliberate scripting models. The behavioral report was returned to the investigative team, stating clearly, no behavioral basis exists to sustain the stranger appearance hypothesis. Jessica's statements exhibit consistent fabrication patterns fitting cases where the witness is directly involved in the victim's disappearance. This officially reinforced Jessica's reclassification. From witness to primary suspect in the 2016 case reinvestigation phase. During the late 2016 review of all remaining physical documents in Ethan Caldwell's file, the new investigative team conducted a full inventory of every original file box to fully reconstruct a 2001 investigative context. And it was during this inventory process that they discovered a set of handwritten notes mixed among the preliminary scene minutes, unnumbered and absent from any official index. The handwritten notes, identified as belonging to a frontline investigator from 2001 who participated only in the first 48 hours before being removed from the team when the file shifted focus to Jessica's stranger description, immediately drew the 2016 team's attention because their content showed the original investigator had harbored strong suspicions toward Jessica right on the incident night. Yet none of these notes had ever entered the official file. Legal group analysis indicated this could constitute a Brady violation material favorable to suspect evaluation or investigative direction change that was withheld rather than included in the file for case review. The handwritten pages described a series of anomalies the original investigator observed. Jessica showed no panic consistent with someone who had just been chased through the forest. Her clothing was completely free of tears, scratches, or soil, despite her claim of running through thick brush. Her voice during event description had multiple hesitations resembling word searching rather than memory recall, and particularly, she asked nothing about Ethan's condition throughout the first interview, an illogical omission for any witness genuinely fearing for their companion, per the investigator's experience. The investigator also recorded doubts about Jessica's claimed travel time. She said she immediately ran back to the main road in panic after Ethan was pulled away. Yet the investigator noted she could not describe the distance, recall direction, and showed no physical signs of having run a long distance in dark forest conditions. Another note pointed out Jessica's repeated changes in detail level about the strange man's appearance, sometimes only a silhouette, other times clear descriptions of dark clothing color and superior height. The investigator wrote, "Feels like the story's being built layer by layer, not recounted from consistent memory." Most notably, a page-and-a-half note laid out the hypothesis no stranger existed, stating, "I think we're looking in the wrong direction. No scene evidence supports an attack story. Need to consider the possibility the story was fabricated." However, the notes ended with the line, "Report not entered into official file." Order to redirect focus to Jessica provided description. This line caused the 2016 team to pause, as it proved a critical component of the initial assessment had been excluded from the investigative process, meaning a reasonable investigative direction had been abandoned at the decisive stage. When cross-referenced with all 2016 forensic analyses soil marks contradicting logic, no stranger traces, incorrect driver's seat position, abnormal timeline, mismatched cell data, the 2016 team realized the 2001 notes had anticipated nearly all conclusions that modern technology later proved. This created a breakthrough turning point. For the first time, they had evidence that on the very first night, an investigator had suspected Jessica. But those records were never transferred into the official file, and instead the file was completely redirected by the stranger narrative. An internal legal report confirmed that the note's absence from the official file could constitute Brady material because it could have influenced witness evaluation, timeline establishment, and primary investigative direction. These handwritten notes also included two details never recorded in the file. The investigator who interviewed Jessica at dawn noticed very light soil marks on her hand, near the thumb, not fall-related but resembling marks from someone using their hand to push soil or contact soft ground, yet no samples were collected due to lack of deep forensic procedure at the time. The second anomaly, Jessica's 911 call phone had fresh scratches on the back, as if dragged or scraped against ground. Neither detail appeared in any 2001-2003 report. Compiling all the notes, the investigative team determined they contained critical information capable of completely altering investigative direction. Suspicion of Jessica's behavior existed from the outset, but was never reflected in official documentation. This led the new team to conclude they were not merely re-examining an old file with new techniques, but, for the first time, recovering a correct investigative direction that had been previously eliminated. A summary report was prepared with a clear conclusion. 2001 notes exhibit anomalies aligning with current forensic findings. Failure to include notes in the file altered the investigation's nature. This is a turning point, requiring redirection from stranger hypothesis to internal suspect hypothesis. With this discovery, the entire investigation entered a completely different phase. After the discovery of the concealed 2001 notebook and confirmation that the frontline investigators' initial observations aligned unusually with the full forensic, behavioral, and timeline results collected by the 2016 investigative team, the dedicated group proceeded to a comprehensive logical chaining step to determine which hypothesis retained plausibility when cross-referenced against all available data. They began by synthesizing the forensic results. Soil DNA proved the vehicle had been moved to an intermediate location before stopping in Croatan, contradicting the statement that Ethan and Jessica drove straight into the forest. The driver's seat position was misadjusted compared to Ethan's driving habit, where points on the steering wheel indicated the final driver had height and posture inconsistent with the victim. Luminol detected faint organic traces at positions incompatible with the pulled from the vehicle description, and soil marks around the vehicle entirely ruled out a struggle or stranger appearance scenario. These results were aligned with the BAU behavioral analysis. Jessica's statement exhibited loop structure, lacked factual detail, selectively changed core elements while preserving the stranger motif, fitting post-accident fabrication or concealment models. Voice stress analysis showed sudden tension spikes precisely in passages describing the black man, perfectly matching perpetrator fabrication behavior to divert attention, and the complete absence of genuine panic behavior from physical responses to demeanor in the first interview reinforced that the statement was not rooted in real memory. When forensic and behavioral data were integrated with the timeline, the picture clarified further. The 45 to 60-minute unexplained gap did not fit Jessica's narrative. Cell data proved her 911 call location lay outside her described route, and LiDAR GPR data confirmed 3 soil areas with digging and filling signs near the vehicle position, opening the possibility that Ethan had been handled during the time she could not account for. Conversely, the entire official timeline contained no evidence whatsoever of a strange man appearance. No witnesses saw any suspect. No cameras captured unusual movement, and no physical traces matched a stranger attack model. The investigative team concluded that the stranger hypothesis not only lacked evidence but was entirely eliminated by forensic, behavioral, and scene data. Next, the group aligned the new data with the concealed 2001 notes, a pivotal document in establishing what should have been the correct investigative direction from the beginning. The frontline investigators' notes clearly stated that Jessica showed no appropriate panic signs, did not inquire about Ethan's condition, had no escape-related traces, and provided contradictory descriptions right on the incident night. Notably, these observations matched precisely with the 2016 forensic and behavioral findings, even though the notes predated modern analytical technologies. This proved Jessica's story was inconsistent from the very first moments and that the investigative redirection toward the stranger was a direct consequence of excluding the notes from the file. After connecting all data layers, the investigative team constructed an elimination matrix in which each hypothesis was evaluated for compatibility with forensic, timeline, behavioral, and scene evidence. The accident concealment hypothesis aligned with the absence of struggle traces, aligned with soil marks around the vehicle, aligned with a large unexplained time gap, aligned with mismatched cell data, and aligned with all fabrication behavioral characteristics. The stranger perpetrated crime hypothesis was incompatible with forensic, incompatible with timeline, incompatible with cell data, incompatible with LiDAR GPR data, and incompatible with genuine witness behavioral models. The hypothesis of Ethan voluntarily leaving the area was eliminated due to the complete absence of footprints or movement traces impossible in Croatan Forest's thick pine needle layer if someone had walked away from the vehicle. The third-party acquaintance hypothesis had no supporting data points. After eliminating all non-viable hypotheses, the remaining logical chain supported only one direction. Jessica was the last person with Ethan. Her statement carried full fabrication characteristics. Forensic proved the vehicle was driven by someone else. The timeline contained an unexplainable gap, and the digging and filling soil areas were located precisely in the region she claimed, not remembering the escape route. From this, the investigative team determined Jessica was the only plausible suspect across the entire behavioral forensic timeline scene model. This was the first time in 15 years that a unified conclusion emerged from every analytical direction, and the 2016 investigative team summary report stated clearly, no other hypothesis retains logical viability when cross-referenced against the full data set. Jessica Marlowe is the only individual present with opportunity, with contradictory statements, and with behavior consistent with post-incident concealment. The stranger-perpetrator hypothesis no longer exists within reasonable investigative scope. This report completed the investigative logical chain and transitioned the case to the next phase. After completing the elimination matrix and identifying Jessica Marlowe as the only plausible suspect across the full forensic, behavioral, timeline, and scene data chain, the investigative team moved to the critical phase, building a sufficiently robust file to present to the prosecutor's office requesting an arrest warrant based on a tightly linked chain of circumstantial evidence. The dedicated team began by systematizing all physical evidence. Soil DNA showed the vehicle was moved through an intermediate location before stopping in Croatan Forest. Driver's seat and steering wheel wear patterns ruled out Ethan as the final operator. LiDAR identified 3 non-natural digging and filling soil areas. GPR verified disturbed soil structure. And luminol detected faint organic traces at positions incompatible with the pulled from the vehicle narrative. When combined, these formed a material foundation sufficient to affirm that Jessica's provided sequence did not match the actual scene. Next, the team synthesized temporal evidence, including estimated timeline based on town witnesses, cell data, and travel analysis. Cell towers confirmed Jessica's 911 call originated from a location outside her described route. The 45 to 60-minute unexplained gap persisted, and no objective data whatsoever supported a stranger appearance during that period. Integrating these elements, the team created a timeline deviation summary table showing Jessica's statement was not only inconsistent but directly conflicted with technical data. The third component of the file was statement and behavioral analysis. Voice stress analysis indicated abnormal tension spikes precisely in stranger description sections. Bao determined the narrative structure, followed a fabrication template, and comparison of 2001 to 2016 statements showed selective changes to core details consistent with fabricator behavior rather than genuine witness recall. The behavioral report was incorporated into the arrest file as motive and response pattern analysis, reinforcing the likelihood that Jessica had constructed the story to conceal the truth. Additionally, the 2001 concealed notes discovery became a key legal element. The notes showed a frontline investigator suspected Jessica from the outset, recorded anomalies in her statement and physical state on the incident night, and concluded the stranger description did not match the scene, all aligning with modern forensic analysis. This proved suspicion toward Jessica was not a new inference based on technology, but an initial investigative direction that had been overlooked. The team included these notes in the file as a critical piece demonstrating that a reasonable investigative path had been interrupted. After compiling the 4 evidence groups, the investigative team prepared the arrest warrant recommendation report. The report stated clearly that physical evidence, timeline analysis, positioning data, behavioral analysis, and Brady findings all converged on one conclusion. Jessica was the last person with Ethan. Her statement did not match the scene. She had sole opportunity to affect the victim and operate the vehicle afterward. The report also emphasized that although no body had been recovered at that point, the entire logical chain had fully eliminated alternative hypotheses. The prosecutor's office requested the team add a pre- and post-arrest risk section to assess Jessica's flight risk, potential evidence destruction, or witness influence. The behavioral group prepared a risk analysis showing Jessica exhibited strong narrative control and a pattern of adjusting statements under questioning, meaning if aware of the file redirection, she might attempt to destroy remaining evidence or alter her living situation. Therefore, the investigative team recommended prompt arrest and immediate interrogation upon warrant issuance. In the interrogation scenario planning section, BIA designed 3 phases, breaking the 2001 story structure, creating cognitive gaps to prevent reliance on the stranger motif, and logical forensic confrontation to force confrontation with unexplainable data. The interrogation scenario was constructed to exploit the weakest point of Jessica's statement, the irreconcilable contradiction between field reality and her provided content. Once the full documentation was complete, the team structured the warrant file per standard: physical evidence section, technical analysis section, behavioral analysis section, timeline section, and Brady findings section. All were countersigned by the cold case team lead, forensic specialist, and BAU representative. This file was then presented to the Carteret County Prosecutor's Office for evaluation of the arrest warrant request against Jessica Marlowe, marking the official transition from analytical investigation to legal action. Immediately after, the Carteret County Prosecutor's Office approved the file and signed the arrest warrant for Jessica Marlowe. Based on the compiled forensic, timeline, behavioral, and Brady evidence, the investigative team executed the arrest plan in Wilmington, where Jessica had relocated in 2011. The action plan was designed to ensure surprise, prevent Jessica from having time to process or destroy personal devices, and minimize the risk of flight or contact with anyone who could influence the investigation. The arrest execution team consisted of 4 Carteret County investigators and 2 supporting SBI agents departing for Wilmington at 5 a.m. to coincide with Jessica's typical pre-work home presence. Upon arriving at her apartment complex, the team approached in a split formation, one group at the apartment door, the other covering the stairwell and parking area, to block secondary escape routes. After confirming Jessica's presence through observed interior lights and movement, the team leader knocked and announced identity, while stating the warrant per legal requirement. Jessica opened the door in evident surprise, offered no resistance, but displayed clear confusion upon hearing the arrest warrant related to Ethan Caldwell's disappearance. The team leader immediately directed her to step aside, applied handcuffs per protocol, and advised her of her right to remain silent and right to counsel. Once Jessica was safely secured, the technical team conducted seizure of personal devices including cell phone, laptop, storage drives, and any visible related documents in the living room and bedroom. They also seized scattered notes and diary entries from a cabinet drawer, all sealed under new evidence codes. The seizure aimed to preserve any materials potentially related to travel timeline, communications, or behavioral patterns before and during the file reopening. After completing the preliminary inventory, Jessica was escorted from the apartment and placed in the sheriff's office transport vehicle. During the nearly 2-hour drive back to Carteret County, she made no voluntary statements beyond asserting, "I didn't do anything wrong," but the investigative team adhered strictly to no substantive discussion outside legal parameters until formal interrogation. The transport route was controlled to avoid media or public attention. Upon arrival at Carteret County Sheriff's Office, Jessica was processed in the suspect intake area, including identification, fingerprinting, and medical check per regulations. All personal items she carried were separated, inventoried, and transferred to evidence processing. The arrest was officially logged into the system at 9:12 a.m., with simultaneous notification to the prosecutor's office that the suspect had been safely transported and was ready for interrogation. Jessica's arrest marked a major transition in the investigative process. For the first time since 2001, the team had direct opportunity to confront the suspect with the fully reconstructed evidence chain built through modern technology and analysis, opening the next critical phase of the case. After Jessica Marlowe was transported to Carteret County and intake procedures completed, the investigative team entered the decisive interrogation phase, structured in 3 breakdown layers: breaking the 2001 narrative, dismantling the fabrication structure, and shattering the psychological anchor to force the suspect to confront the full forensic timeline behavioral data chain without clinging to the stranger motif. The interrogation session occurred in a specialized room, fully audio and video recorded. When Jessica was brought in, she maintained a defensive posture, arms crossed, avoiding eye contact with investigators. The interrogation team did not begin with direct confrontation, but allowed her to recount the story exactly as in 2001, without interruption or intervention. The purpose was to reactivate the motif she had repeated for 15 years and assess its stability. Upon completion, the lead investigator placed 3 large boards in front of her: 1 timeline board, 1 forensic board, and 1 behavioral board. The timeline board highlighted irreconcilable contradictions, from the vehicle's departure from the parking lot to the cell tower location of the 911 call, to the 45 to 60-minute unexplained gap Jessica had never accounted for. When asked why her call location was far from her described route, Jessica fell silent, then said, "I was panicked. I don't remember." But the investigator continued cross-referencing with cell data to demonstrate the distance could not result from the running wildly in the forest she described. The second interrogation layer began when the investigator displayed forensic results on screen. Soil DNA proved the vehicle was driven through another location before entering the forest. Driver's seat configuration mismatched Ethan's height. Steering wheel wear indicated different driving habits. Luminol detected faint organic traces at positions unrelated to an attack, and soil marks around the vehicle completely incompatible with pulled into the forest. Jessica leaned back, eyes darting rapidly between the data boards, but offered no specific rebuttal. The investigator continued, emphasizing, "There was no stranger there. No footprints, no struggle marks, no evidence whatsoever that the story you told ever happened." Jessica responded by insisting, "I clearly remember what I saw," but her voice began to falter, matching psychological tension patterns when confronted with undeniable data. In the third layer, the investigator presented the Brady discovery, the concealed 2001 investigator's notes detailing Jessica's anomalies right on the incident night. Jessica stared intently at the document, and when asked why those anomalies existed, she could not answer. Next, the investigator presented the BAU behavioral analysis. Jessica's narrative structure was looped. The story changed selectively, but preserved the stranger motif. Complete absence of genuine sensory spatial auditory details typical of real witnesses, and voice stress analysis revealed clear fabrication points. When the investigator asked, "Jessica, your story no longer holds. What do you want to happen next? What do you want us to find in the forest?" This became the first psychological break. Jessica lowered her head, avoided the camera, and sat motionless for nearly 40 seconds of response, commonly seen when a suspect realizes the complete collapse of their fabricated narrative. The investigator applied no direct pressure but shifted to a softer approach, describing the 3 soil areas with digging and filling signs identified by drone LiDAR and GPR. Upon hearing manual digging and filling, Jessica flinched slightly, a subconscious reaction immediately noted by the behavioral analysis team. The investigator asked, "Jessica, do you want us to dig up those 3 locations? Are you sure what we find won't relate to you?" Jessica began trembling in her hands. Breathing accelerated, and when the investigator continued pressing, "We know Ethan did not leave that vehicle under his own power. We know someone else drove it to Croatan. And we know who was the last person with him." Jessica's psychological barrier began to crumble. She said, "You don't understand what happened," but could not elaborate. The investigator lowered their voice. "If it was an accident, Jessica, an accident isn't murder. But hiding the truth, fabricating a stranger, letting Ethan's family suffer for 15 years, that's what makes it heavier for you. This is your only chance to tell the truth." This was the pivotal moment. Jessica burst into tears, hands covering her face, attempting deep breaths but unable to control her facial muscles. When the investigator placed a photograph of Ethan taken weeks before his disappearance in front of her, she lowered her hands and began speaking through sobs. The true statement began with, "I didn't mean to hurt him." She recounted that evening, she and Ethan had a heated argument in the vehicle after driving to a different location. Not Croatan and Ethan demanded complete cessation of contact. In the tension, Ethan stepped out of the vehicle, slipped, and struck his head hard on a low rock. Jessica panicked, believing he was dead or would blame her if he survived. Instead of calling emergency services, she dragged him back into the vehicle, drove to the Croatan area to stage a false scene, and created the stranger story. When asked for the precise location where she left Ethan's body, Jessica looked down at the table and whispered, "At the 3rd location, where the ground sank." This was the first time in 15 years that the true sequence of Ethan Caldwell's disappearance night was acknowledged in words from the sole witness. Immediately after Jessica Marlowe confessed the location where she buried Ethan Caldwell's body and confirmed it was the 3rd of the 3 digging and filling soil areas previously identified by LiDAR and GPR. The investigative team immediately initiated exhumation procedures per forensic standards to preserve evidence integrity. Before proceeding to Croatan, the Geophysical Technical Group re-reviewed all collected GPR data to confirm that the strongest reflective signal, the area with curved void and abnormal compaction, was precisely the position Jessica described. By increasing signal resolution and smoothing the response curves, the GPR team pinpointed the center of the disturbed soil structure, thereby delineating the precise exhumation area with a diameter of approximately 1.8 meters. The investigative team erected isolation barriers, marked the entire zone with survey stakes, and established a single access path to avoid disturbing the surface soil layer. Once all preparatory steps were complete, the forensic archaeology team began removing the initial soil layer using small tools to ensure no damage to potential evidence. The initial natural soil depth matched GPR data precisely, 10-12 centimeters topsoil, followed by a looser, less uniform disturbed layer with inconsistent color. At approximately 35 centimeters depth, the team detected a clear structural change. Soil color shifted to darker gray tones mixed with uniform undecomposed organic particles, hallmarks of temporary fill compaction. As this layer was carefully peeled away, a faint, curved outline appeared, matching the GPR-recorded shape, followed by a hard object lightly contacting the metal tool. Excavation shifted to fully manual using specialized metal spoons to avoid impacting subsurface material. After several minutes of careful work, the exhumation team exposed a human foot bone, positioned sideways, buried shallower than anticipated. The area was immediately widened by 40 centimeters on each side to reveal the leg and lower leg bone structure. Continuing to clear surrounding soil, the forensic team confirmed the body posture indicated sideways positioning to the left, with slightly flexed legs, a posture consistent with hasty placement into an insufficiently wide pit. This aligned with Jessica's confession that she panicked, dug only a shallow grave, and did not control the body's positioning. As excavation reached the torso region, the team discovered tattered fabric fragments with patterning matching family descriptions of the shirt Ethan wore that night. Several buttons remained intact, and inner fabric showed less decomposition due to limited soil exposure, allowing forensic identification of the garment layer. Near the hip area, the team recovered a tarnished metal keychain still retaining its shape, the type Ethan commonly used, per family photographs in the old file. Upon exposing the skull, forensic personnel confirmed a long fracture running horizontally across the left side, consistent with Jessica's description of Ethan slipping and striking his head forcefully on a rock. The fracture lacked characteristics of blunt force weapon impact and instead resembled trauma from horizontal contact with a hard surface. This supported that the initial event may have been accidental, as Jessica confessed prior to her decision to conceal it. All evidence was photographed, numbered, GPS forensically coordinated, and collected per NIJ protocol. During collection of chest region bones, the forensic team discovered an additional critical item, a small circular plastic fragment, slightly deformed, typical of pieces broken from a front headlight during minor impact. This fragment appeared in none of the 2001 investigation notes, making it entirely new evidence, and its position near rib bones suggested it may have fallen during body placement. Adjacent to the plastic piece, the team recovered a small fabric strip, possibly clothing or seed lining, but advanced decomposition made color identification difficult. The forensic team decided to seal and forward the fiber sample to the lab for fabric origin analysis to determine whether it derived from the vehicle interior or Ethan's clothing. Once the full skeleton was exposed, the forensic team created a 3D laser-scanned map of the burial pit structure, curvature, depth, and body orientation. Measurement results showed the body position perfectly matched the location Jessica described during interrogation, 27 meters from the trail, 9 meters from a large pine bush, and slightly offset southeast, precisely the direction she indicated when the investigative team requested reconfirmation on the map. Investigators recorded this match as validating Jessica's confession. After the remains were lifted and placed in a preservation bag, the team rechecked the pit bottom to ensure no evidence was overlooked. At the pit base, the team discovered 2 additional small items, a corroded coin and a blue plastic bead. No immediate data linked these to Ethan, but they were collected due to their proximity to the foot bones, preventing exclusion of the possibility they dislodged during body transport. Finally, the forensic team leveled the pit mouth, marked coordinates with scene codes, and transmitted all information to the temporary command center established at the forest entrance. The exhumation concluded with an official finding. Human remains were recovered at a location fully matching Jessica's confession, and all scene indicators confirmed this is a manual, shallow burial conducted in a short time frame, consistent with the sequence Jessica provided during interrogation. Recovery of the body concluded the most critical field investigation phase of the case since 2001. After the body was exhumed from Croatan Forest and transferred to the Carteret County Forensic Lab, the examination team conducted a comprehensive analysis to determine the cause of death, assess signs of external force, and cross-reference findings with Jessica Marlowe's final confession. The analysis began with full skeletal X-rays, which clearly revealed a long fracture line on the left side of the skull, extending from the temporal region down to the crown, characterized by a single, unbranched linear break, consistent with impact trauma against a hard surface rather than direct assault by a sharp or blunt object wielded by another person. The fracture had clean, slightly curved edges following the skull's contour without deep depression, indicating force from the head striking a fixed object, precisely matching Jessica's description of Ethan, slipping and striking his head on a low rock during the argument. Continuing the examination, the forensic pathologist found no additional signs of violent trauma on the skeleton, no defensive fractures on the hands, no rib or torso indications of struggle, and no evidence of heavy object impact after the victim had fallen. This completely ruled out any third-party direct assault and was inconsistent with any model involving beating, strangulation, or restraint. The forensic team closely examined joint regions and determined the degree of bone preservation was consistent with 15 years of decomposition under Croatan's humid conditions, confirming the body had remained in the burial pit from shortly after the disappearance date, with no subsequent movement or disturbance. Micromorphological analysis of the skull showed cellular cracking patterns consistent with perimortem lethal trauma while the victim was alive, meaning Ethan was not moved after death by any other force. This reinforced the conclusion that the head impact was the sole cause of death. Examination of the hip and leg bones noted the body's slightly flexed and left-leaning posture, consistent with hasty placement into a shallow pit, with no long drag marks and no post-mortem breakage from external force. This posture matched the exhumation scene description and proved Jessica did not misstate how she positioned the body after believing Ethan was dead. Regarding time of death, the forensic team used decomposition level, residual soft tissue erosion, chest cavity soil structure, and larval distribution across soil layers to estimate death occurred during the night of Ethan's disappearance and into the following morning. Cross-referencing 2001 Croatan weather records, temperature, and humidity, the findings aligned perfectly with Ethan dying that same night. No evidence suggested the body was held elsewhere before burial, as fill structure, larval layering, and microbial distribution all indicated decomposition began at the exact exhumation site. To rule out third-party involvement, the forensic team specially examined the neck, hyoid bone, upper ribs, and cervical spine for signs of strangulation, ligature, or forceful compression, but the entire area showed no fractures, no microcracks, and no circumferential wear, meaning no form of physical restraint occurred. This aligned with scene forensic results: no struggle-related soil disturbance, no third-party footprints, and no assault evidence. From these findings, the forensic team concluded that the death model in Jessica's final confession and accidental fall and impact was fully consistent with osteological evidence. Additionally, analysis of associated items, including the plastic fragment found near the burial pit, identified it as material from a 1990s-era pickup truck headlight matching Ethan's Ford Ranger. The fragment caused no injury, but was determined likely to have broken off during Jessica's handling of the body. Fiber analysis of a decomposed fabric portion showed polyester composition matching vehicle seat lining rather than the victim's clothing, reinforcing that the body had direct contact with the vehicle interior after the accident. No evidence suggested intentional violent intervention or a third party's presence. All forensic results were compiled in the official report, concluding 3 key points. Cause of death was head trauma from accidental fall. No signs of assault or third-party intervention, and time of death matched the night of Ethan's disappearance. The report determined that the sequence described by Jessica, an argument leading to accident, followed by panic and concealment, was the only model consistent with the full forensic data. Based on Jessica Marlowe's true confession, forensic results, forensic analysis, timeline data, and all evidence gathered during the 2016 reinvestigation, the investigative team reconstructed the complete sequence of events in chronological order, matching each action milestone to physical evidence, scene characteristics, and every discrepancy recorded since 2001. On the evening of the incident, Ethan Caldwell left home after 9 p.m. to meet Jessica near US 70, where they had previously arranged to meet. Message records and witness statements confirmed the purpose was to definitively discuss their strained relationship. After the meeting, according to Jessica's true confession, they drove in Ethan's Ford Ranger to a secluded area, not Croatan, but a dirt road about 20 minutes from Wilmington. There, the argument escalated sharply when Ethan declared he wanted to end all contact and demanded Jessica leave his life. Behavioral analysis indicated Jessica's prior psychological instability aligned with high emotional vulnerability, increasing the likelihood of uncontrolled reaction during conflict. Ethan stepped out of the vehicle first, intending to walk away down the dirt road. Jessica followed, continuing the argument and grabbing Ethan's arm in an attempt to stop him. During the struggle, according to the final confession, Ethan slipped on an exposed root, lost balance and fell hard, striking his head on a low rock beside the road. Forensic results confirmed this impact caused the long left side skull fracture exactly as Jessica described and fully consistent with the cause of death. The accident timing was estimated between 10:20 and 10:40 p.m., matching decomposition analysis and bone condition. After the fall, Ethan lost consciousness immediately. Jessica, in panic, checked for breathing but found no response. Her failure to call emergency services at that moment, the pivotal point of the concealment chain, was explained by Jessica as fear of blame and confusion from the rapid sequence. Behavioral analysis showed this reaction fit the typical pattern of someone causing an unintentional accident but choosing concealment due to overwhelming emotion. This marked the start of the 45 to 60-minute unexplained gap in the original timeline. Jessica attempted to drag Ethan's body back into the vehicle, causing the fabric wear and organic traces later found in the cabin by forensics. Moving the body into the truck bed or rear compartment was confirmed as likely by the investigative team due to the absence of long ground drag marks at the initial site. After placing Ethan in the vehicle, Jessica drove away from the original scene, creating the foreign soil layer adhering to the undercarriage traces identified by soil DNA. The subsequent route took Jessica to Croatan Forest, where she believed the vast dark area would conceal her actions. Forensic seat analysis proved the driver on this leg was not Ethan, fully aligning with a true confession. Jessica drove deeper in, found a small trail, and stopped at the location where search teams discovered the vehicle the next morning. The absence of soil disturbance around the vehicle matched Jessica's description that she only opened the driver's and rear doors without dragging the body beyond the immediate vehicle edge. After exiting, Jessica selected an area about 20 meters from the trail and began digging a pit by hand. Forensic GPR and exhumation scene both confirmed a shallow, approximately 40 centimeters deep, asymmetrically shaped pit consistent with short-duration manual digging. Once the pit was deep enough to cover the upper body, Jessica pulled the body down by gripping both sides of the shirt and let it fall sideways, exactly the posture recorded by the forensic team. Several items such as the headlight plastic fragment and seat fabric fibers likely dislodged during this process and were found near the rib bones during exhumation. After filling the pit, Jessica returned to the vehicle and began constructing the stranger story. To create an emergency appearance, she drove to an area near a different cell tower, causing the 911 call location mismatch later detected in the 2016 analysis. This behavior fit the BAU-described scripting model, creating distance between the true scene and the reporting point to reduce suspicion. From that point, Jessica maintained the stranger motif in all statements despite the lack of field evidence. When cross-referenced with 2016 forensic reconstruction, every trace-aligned soil marks around the Croatan vehicle showed no struggle. LiDAR GPR identified the burial pit at the location Jessica confessed. Cell data proved the 911 call point did not lie on her described route. Behavioral analysis concluded the 2001 story was not based on real memory, and forensics confirmed accidental death, not assault. From this complete data synthesis, the investigative team established the core conclusion chain. Ethan died from an accidental fall during the argument. Jessica panicked, placed the body in the vehicle, and transported to Croatan Forest. She dug a shallow pit and buried the body in a sideways position. She then fabricated the stranger story to conceal responsibility. This is the only sequence fully consistent with all collected evidence. The 2016 trial opened in Carteret County Superior Court, marking the final phase of a disappearance case that spanned more than 15 years and for the first time presenting the complete forensic timeline, true confession, and behavioral evidence before the jury. The prosecution began by outlining the new investigative chain, emphasizing that the case had reached impasse not due to lack of evidence, but because the initial direction was misled by Jessica's fabricated story. LiDAR images showed 3 digging and filling soil areas, GPR data pinpointed the burial location, soil DNA proved the vehicle was driven through an intermediate point, and seat and steering wheel analysis ruled out Ethan as the final driver, all displayed on large screens to clearly demonstrate irreconcilable contradictions with the stranger narrative. The prosecution continued with voice stress analysis, BAU results, and timeline cross-references, highlighting every point where Jessica's statements changed, every unexplained time gap, and how positioning data refuted her claimed route. During the forensic portion, the pathologist described Ethan's head injury, concluding cause of death was accidental fall, with no signs of violence or third-party intervention. Exhumation photographs of the body in Croatan were presented in court, proving the burial location fully matched Jessica's post-arrest confession. The entire evidence chain was tightly connected by the prosecution, demonstrating Jessica's conduct could not be explained by any model other than accident, concealment, false scene staging. Defense counsel argued Jessica acted in panic, without intent to kill, and the case should be treated as an accident, leading to concealment. But the prosecution countered that 15 years of sustained fabrication, creation of a false suspect, and misdirection of investigators constituted severity far beyond ordinary concealment. When the prosecution presented the section on Elijah Green, initially suspected in the original investigation due to non-standard photo lineup and misleading statements, the jury heard the concealed 2001 Brady notes, in which the frontline investigator rejected the stranger possibility and expressed suspicion of Jessica on the incident night. The appearance of these notes in court was viewed as evidence that Elijah was never a reasonable suspect. The prosecution declared he must be fully exonerated, and the court granted the request, clearing all reference to Elijah from the file. During the plea phase, the recorded interrogation in which Jessica admitted the accident and disclosed the burial location was played back. She did not contest the recording's authenticity, and her counsel raised no objection to its admission. After 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict. Jessica Marlowe was guilty of murder in the second degree for conduct during the argument resulting in Ethan's death, along with obstruction of justice for concealing the body, staging the scene, and providing false information over 15 years. The sentence imposed was 22 years for murder 2 and 8 years for obstruction, combined into 30 years imprisonment with possible reduction, but no less than 22 years served. As the judge read the sentence, the prosecution emphasized that while the cause of death was accidental, Jessica's choice to conceal created immeasurable harm to the victim's family and community, while subjecting Elijah Green to years of unwarranted suspicion. An official statement was issued immediately after the trial. Elijah Green was fully exonerated and bore no relation to any part of the file. When the judgment was entered into the system, Ethan Caldwell's file, missing since 2001, classified cold case in 2003, reopened in 2016, was officially closed. After 15 years, the story concluded with legal truth, restoring what the original investigation had lost. In the context of contemporary American society, the story of the Ethan Caldwell case, a 2001 disappearance, finally resolved in 2016, reminds us that truth never disappears. It simply waits to be seen with the right eyes and the right tools. The original investigation veered off course solely because it believed Jessica's account and the stranger narrative, reflecting a persistent issue in American life. People sometimes trust seemingly straightforward stories instead of demanding real evidence. In the age of social media, this becomes even easier when emotion overrides reason. The case of Elijah Green's wrongful suspicion illustrates the destructive power of bias and perceptual error. A non-standard photo lineup and unverified statements caused an innocent man to live under suspicion for years. This serves as an important reminder in modern American society about criminal justice fairness, that every system, no matter how advanced, can err without transparency and accountability. The fact that resolution required modern forensics, such as LiDAR, GPR, soil DNA, and behavioral analysis, underscores the critical role of science in law enforcement. The lesson for us, in personal life, professional work, or community matters, important decisions must rest on evidence, not emotion or assumption. Finally, Jessica's choice to conceal rather than face the truth reminds us that an initial mistake may not ruin our lives, but covering it up certainly will. In a society that values personal responsibility, this story urges each of us to live honestly, accept mistakes, seek help when needed, and avoid letting fear lead to choices that cause long-term harm to ourselves and others. Thank you for following the story to the end. If you want to continue exploring cases that seem forgotten but were ultimately solved through truth and justice, remember to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next video. See you in the next journey, where every clue can change the entire truth.